Hello and welcome to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we're talking the 1982 Best Actress race at the Academy Awards, where Meryl Streep won for her performance in Sophie's Choice. But why did she beat fellow nominees Julie Andrews, Jessica Lange, Sissy Spacek, and Debra Winger? We'll explore all this and more today on And the Runner-Up Is. Hello and welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I'm your host, Kevin Jacobson, here to talk about the 55th year of Best Actress at the Oscars, which covered the films of 1982. We'll be discussing how Meryl Streep won, why the losers lost, and who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. And my guest today, I'm very excited to have on. She's joining me for the very first time, writer for USA Today, The Desert Sun, host of the Weekly Pop podcast, and critic at Next Best Picture. She's all over the place. Welcome to the show, Ema Sasic.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here.
I'm very, very excited to have you and to go on this journey with you in terms of like all of these women I think are sort of more or less in the primes of their careers at this point.
Yes.
And a lot of these feel like kind of like, you know, iconic roles for these particular actresses. So excited to dive in here.
Me too. When you reached out and asked which year I might be interested in, as I look through them this year, I was like, you have Meryl, Jessica, Julie, Sissy, and Debra, like all of these kind of icons. And definitely icons. So I jumped at the opportunity. So very, very excited to chat about them.
Me too. Well, before we get into this year, let us talk Best Actress as a category. So my first question for you, Ema, what is your favorite Best Actress win of all time?
First, I just want to preface this by saying that the Best Actress race is always the best race, I feel.
Correct.
It is consistently the most competitive, the most exciting, the one that will throw you for a loop more often than not. And I have many, many favorites, but always this one sticks out in my mind. It's a more recent winner, so maybe that's why. I will never get over Olivia Colman winning for The Favorite. I will never get over the shock. Truly the shock that I had in that moment, but also the euphoria from seeing someone also as equally shocked as me try to deliver a speech up there. But as I have revisited The Favorite since then, I just appreciate her performance in that movie. It's kind of all these different emotions that she can evoke, whether it's super happy and euphoric at a party to immediately turning sour within like a minute and something pissing her off or her going off and banishing people. So that one is a very fun one for me.
Yeah, very, very good pick. As people know, I am a Glenn Close stan.
I know.
And so that is obviously a loaded race, but just looking at it in a vacuum, I do think that is a very inspired win, you know, and it's one where I feel like as much as it might surprise people for me to say it, it is refreshing sometimes when the Oscars go against a bit of like what the narrative is of what the season is sort of dictating, like, oh, Glenn Close must win, and they're like, well, let's explore all of the options. And that's kind of what happened here. And obviously The Favorite was far more loved than The Wife ultimately, but yeah, great speech, obviously one of the top ever, I think.
Yes, I still did really enjoy Glenn Close in The Wife too, as I was. Yes,
you get to stay.
I know, I was about to say, ooh, hit a sore spot right away.
Yes.
But I'm a big Glenn Close fan too, and I appreciate all the skill that she brings to the screen, and that's what made it even crazier of a win for Olivia Colman, just knowing, as you said, the narrative and everything leading up to that moment.
And speaking of Glenn Close, she actually gets her first nomination this very year that we're talking about in supporting actress. So nice
Yay.
synergy there. So my other question for you, what would you say is your most heartbreaking loss in Best Actress?
There have been many, and again, this is another more recent one. I'm sticking to the more recent here.
Yeah, it's in our lifetime, those are
Yes,
the ones that affect us the most.
yes. I'm still not over Natalie Portman losing the Oscar for Jackie over Emma Stone, who won for La La Land. I will say that I have softened on this issue since then, but that was a very, very tough thing to go through. I think it was what, 2017 was the year that those Oscars were happening. And
Yeah.
I sat down with my friend Kevin, and we both said, obviously, it's Natalie Portman for Jackie. But even if it's not her, Isabelle Huppert for Elle is another
Yeah.
crazy, crazy performance. And so we, unfortunately, as the season kept going, we had to understand that it would most likely be Emma Stone. So it's still a little bit of a sore spot for me. However, I do really love Emma Stone, and she does give a very, very nice performance in that film. But Natalie Portman's still there.
Yeah. Yeah. That was definitely a tough year where I feel like, again, there were a lot of like camps going on there, not even in Best Actress, but like also Moonlight, La La Land. Like there was a
Yes.
lot of like fighting going on
Yes.
in the discourse and in the way that it was written about. But still maintain that's one of the better just modern years of Oscars just in general. Like the
That was
films involved and the acting winners, even I think were all pretty good. So
yeah, that span, and like I think the following year, because we had Get Out and Lady Bird and Call Me by Your
oh
Name,
yeah,
all these very exciting titles that people adore online, but I also feel like translate into real life too. Sometimes there's that disconnect, especially in the last few years with
yeah.
movies coming out and what the public might think. But those were the days. We didn't know how good we had it back then.
I know. Yeah, that's true. Hearing you say that, I'm like, Coda, Power of the Dog. Like, I feel like, did that even really translate to like the mainstream? Probably not really.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, very excited now to talk about the 55th Academy Awards. The nominees were Julie Andrews and Victor Victoria, Jessica Lange and Frances, Sissy Spacek in Missing, Meryl Streep in Sophie's Choice, and Debra Winger in An Officer and a Gentleman, with the winner being the marvelous Meryl Streep, as Sylvester Stallone announced at the time.
Yes.
So, before we break these down individually, Emma, would love to just know your overall thoughts on this lineup.
I mean, as I said a few minutes ago, I was so stoked to see this lineup happen because it's a cool mix of some first time nominees, in one instance, a double nominee,
Yeah.
um, some past Oscar winners also involved in there, and just these names that when you think of movie stars, both present and those of the 80s, I feel like more often than not, many of the names mentioned on this year's nominations are the ones that are going to be named. And people
Yeah.
still think so fondly of, I mean, our marvelous Meryl Streep, and everybody loves Julie Andrews, and just the aura that she brings. And I love Jessica Lange, who I was more so introduced to through American Horror Story, but then watched her movies in the past too. So yeah, this year I was so happy to see this lineup, and a really interesting mix of movies too that they were each
Oh,
nominated
yeah.
for.
Yeah.
So this was a good one.
Good. Yeah. I think this is actually a really, really good lineup. I think everyone here is, very committed and very immersed in their roles. Obviously we have this performance that is just hailed as like an all-timer with Meryl Streep. You have Jessica Lange getting those double nominations. The last time that happened for an actress was Teresa Wright in 1942. So
Been a
it had
while.
been 40 years. And then Sissy Spacek and Debra Winger in roles that I think don't automatically call for Oscars necessarily, which I think is actually a credit to their performances that they were able to sort of rise to the occasion and
Mhm.
sort of elevate the material maybe. And then yeah, Julie Andrews coming back like 2 decades after her prime in the 60s and showing that she still got it. So I think it's a very buzzy kind of line up with like a lot of the bigger names in Hollywood. Yeah, and I also think, sort of like you're saying, all their careers have sort of endured for the most
Mm-hmm.
part, here and
Mm-hmm.
there. Maybe Debra Winger is kind of off and on at times, but the rest of them, I think, have still maintained very strong careers. So
Yeah.
I think it was obvious then, as much as it was now, that Meryl probably had it in the bag, but I do think her competition here was pretty strong. I don't think this is one of those cases where it's like, oh, their obvious winner is towering over the rest of the competition.
Right. Yeah, that was an interesting part of watching all of these movies, just
Yeah,
thinking in the back of your head, is this the one that voters would have gone for? Is this the one that could have pulled up the Glenn Close Olivia Colman upset at the time?
right.
And there was one performance that really did stand
Mm,
for me among the four, which we will get into, of course.
okay. Yeah.
So that was just an interesting way to view all of these movies.
Yeah, definitely. And this is, yeah, like exactly 40 years from when the Oscars were in 1983. So
Mhm.
here we are 40 years later, judging the past. Okay. Let's start first with the divine Julie Andrews in Victor Victoria. So, yes, starting here with the return of a Best Actress winner who we last talked about on the 1965 episode. So that's 17 years ago in movie time. Pretty big gap between nominations. Unfortunately, this is the, as of now, last time that we will talk about her, since this is her third and final nomination.
Aw.
But since The Sound of Music, Julie's been keeping very busy. She was in a number of her husband Blake Edwards' films, including Darling Lily, The Tearman Seed, 10, SOB, and then Victor Victoria here. So they have this long collaboration. She's also doing TV specials in the 70s. She wins her first Emmy. She gets Golden Globe nominations. She did have some flops. It wasn't the best decade for Julie, but here comes Victor Victoria here, which is kind of like this big revival for her, big success, critically acclaimed, and giving her the opportunity to sort of break out of the Mary Poppins, Maria von Trapp image and do some gender bending. So, Victor Victoria is set in 1930s Paris, and it tells the story of two club performers. One is Toddy, an aging gay performer played by Robert Preston, and the other is Victoria, played by Julie, who has a great voice but hasn't quite had her break yet. And the two of them meet, and he decides, after seeing her in like menswear one day, that she could actually make a living as maybe a female impersonator, which would also require her to pretend to be a man. So the ruse ends up working out. She's a big sensation. And then we have this guy, King, who sees her in the audience and falls in love, but is not convinced that she is actually a man. And the two of them enter into a very unique sort of relationship. So let's talk Victor Victoria and Julie Andrews. As everyone does, I'm sure you have a relationship with Julie Andrews and especially her early work. So if you want to talk about that, feel free. But also her very different turn here in Victor Victoria.
Absolutely. As you brought up in your introduction, we consider her as Mary Poppins. She is always going to automatically be Mary Poppins or the
Yeah.
saint that she is in The Sound of Music. So you just visualize her as some angelic presence that's here with us on Earth. And
Mm-hmm.
anytime I see her, she just looks so beautiful and so proper and primed and everything. It's funny, I most associate her with the New Year's orchestra that plays in Vienna every single year. And it's only because I used to play the violin when I was little. And so my dad would always turn that on, and she would always be the person just presenting the orchestra before this PBS special airs. So I have a very soft spot for her in my Orchidork days. But yeah, it was really cool to see her in this. It reminded me of kind of cabaret in a sense, kind of that similar time frame, the club setting, and just how so a little grimy Paris was back in the day. And yeah, it was very interesting to still see her use her musical chops, which we know and recognize her with, but also just kind of going in a more comedic direction at times, very sneaky in other times. And of course, you got a little bit of a love story in there that like many of the past love stories, might feel a little underbaked at times. But yeah, this was a very interesting one to see her in, and very exciting to see the nomination for Preston as well, just because he was
Mm,
a joy in this movie.
yes, very much a classic supporting standout.
Right.
Yeah, I think this is a wonderful performance, and I feel like it's so tricky to actually pull off.
Hmm.
You know, people have listened to other episodes when I talk about Julie Andrews know that I just love her as her screen presence, and I gave her the win for both Mary Poppins and The Sound of Music.
Oh
Both of
yeah.
those movies, you know, sort of embedded in my childhood, and Victor Victoria is like seeing this sort of childhood favorite in a whole new light, still having that warm presence, you know, but dealing in, for me, much more complex themes,
Hmm.
because like she's known for her femininity and her soprano voice and her sort of maternal figure status. So I definitely think this was a stretch for her. She wrote in her memoir that she had doubts about whether she could accurately portray a man. And she
Mm.
said that she sort of studied men everywhere she went, and she noticed like these little things, like how they like sit with their legs apart, they put their hands in their pockets, like their faces are less animated. And she said, I decided that aiming for stillness was my best bet. And I do think that that's what we see in the film, and when she is trying to be a man, in the sense that I feel like maybe you never quite lose the sense that this is Julie Andrews, and
Hmm.
that she probably wouldn't fool as many people as she does in the film. But it's like if you kind of let go of a little bit of the realism aspect and just sort of embrace it for what it is, just like campy and fun, I do think it kind of works.
I agree. I similarly, I thought, how would anybody not recognize this, petite
Right.
figure? Um, but yeah, she fully committed to it, and as you said with the mannerisms, she'll stroke back her hair kind of to slick it back, as some men do who have a similar hairstyle, and then just trying to like walk really, strong
Yeah.
shoulders as a man does. And yeah, you just kind of let go of the fact that it is Julie Andrews, that it is this beloved figure, and just have fun with it. And it seems like she had fun with it as well. And I mean, she has a really nice band of co-stars in this film too. James
Yeah.
Garner is in the film, who kind of plays this love interest for her, and he is a handsome man, and I
He
don't
is.
blame
You got to give
her.
it to him. Yeah.
You have to give it to him. But yeah, they had a very interesting relationship going on, and as I mentioned, with Preston, how great of a duo they were together, and he shines with her, and he also shines on his own. But them particularly together is such a highlight in this film.
Yeah. They have really excellent chemistry, her and
Mhm.
Robert Preston, more so than I think her and James Garner, quite frankly.
Yes, I would
But
agree.
sometimes that's just how it goes with, like, you know, gay best friend and woman sort of thing. Yeah, I think this is just a really fun mode to see her in, and showing how like she, as Victoria in the beginning, knows that she's talented. She has the great soprano voice, and she has honed her craft at everything. But because things have turned out the way they have, life being what it is, she hasn't really gotten the opportunities that maybe she deserved. And I think you can see her sort of having more fun here with being someone who may think highly of her talent, but it's not actually getting her anywhere in the beginning.
Mhm.
Like in Mary Poppins or The Sound of Music, like she doesn't have to be like this sunshiny sort of positive persona, or like G-rated sort of maternal figure. Like
Mhm.
she's a flawed person, and she's lived a difficult life, you know? And so I think there is more opportunity for her to go a little deeper, a little darker, not fully, and obviously there's a lot darker stuff going on in most of the other performances we'll
Yes.
talk about, but it is refreshing to me that it feels like she's given more opportunity to be a like a flesh and blood human, and not like a saint or like a mystical nanny, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I appreciated that too. You see a little bit of her current life and living situation, which is not great whatsoever. The struggling artist, the a little bit of a temper she might have, the sneakiness
Right.
that she has, especially when she and Robert Preston are mischieving together. And then,
The
of course,
cockroach in the food.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And then, of course, just playing up this shtick and kind of seeing how far can we really take it. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's really exciting when, as you said, you get to really know a character and an actor gets to explore the many faces of that person because people have many different sides to them, and
Right.
she showed quite a few.
Yes, quite literally in this case. Um, yeah, and she also gets some fun, obviously, like physical comedy, like
Hmm.
the moment when she punches this guy who's like the lover of Robert Preston, and she's obviously wearing the hat and the sort of pinstripe suit, and like telling him to pick on someone his own size and
Yeah.
like literally kicking his ass. Like it's very, very fun physical comedy. It's obviously very broad, and this is, a farce ultimately at the end of the day, but she's clearly just having a ball with it. And I think, her being Blake Edwards' wife and frequent collaborator, I think they both understand the sort of tone of what the film is going for.
I
So,
wonder I wonder if this is what started the, if this exists, the Julie Andrews Step on Me challenge, if this movie was the one that got everyone going.
yeah, I could see it. I could see it. It could be an awakening for some, perhaps.
This is mother level right here.
Truly, yes. It's interesting. Look, especially I think one key moment in the film is obviously the turning point in the beginning of Toddy, looking at her and realizing that she could actually pass for a female impersonator and going about the sort of ruse of her dressing as a gay, male, Polish female impersonator. And she has her reservations, obviously, at first, but she kind of is just like, sure, like what else do I have to lose at this point? My
Yeah.
career prospects are going nowhere at the moment, so might as well try this out. I'm curious if you think that, like, naturally this is what the character would be doing and if she's communicating that aspect of it, because it's kind of like a far out there idea, obviously.
Yeah, I can see both sides. I think that because Robert Preston's character does kind of have this, he just seems like a person that you want to spend time with. And so I
Yeah.
feel like if she saw that dressing up as a man and impersonating a woman is the way to do it, then she will do that just to spend time with him. So I can see the two of, I mean, they bounce off so well together that any crazy idea that one has, the other, I feel like, just gobbles it and maybe takes it even to a whole different level. And,
Yeah.
she immediately gets the even shorter haircut and
Hmm.
embraces it on stage with each of those moments where peeling off the wig and
The
everybody,
reveals,
yes,
yes.
the real reveals, all of that just seems like she is eating it up. So I see why she did it. And,
Yeah,
like we said, we see her home life, and I feel like anything is better than that.
exactly. Right. Yeah, I think she makes that transition work well. And we should definitely talk about the performances that she
Yes.
gives, because
Yes.
as she does in all of her roles, she gets to showcase her beautiful singing voice. I think obviously the standout performance is when she sings Le Jazz Hot, which is such a difficult song to sing, let alone like her playing it at a less natural octave than
Mhm.
Julie Andrews normally would, because
Mhm.
obviously she has to go a little deeper with it. And I think she really nails like the big sort of over exaggerated gestures and everything, like really working her shoulders and
Yeah.
making those kind of broad, sort of like lip syncing faces that you would naturally do in drag performance.
Mhm.
Also, that last note that she extends is so impressive, like starting so low and going like all the way up
Yep.
in her vocal range without even needing a breath. I'm like, damn, okay, Julie.
Nobody does it like her. And
Yeah.
yeah, just so fully committed to each performance, getting so into it. My favorite moment was always hitting, what was it, B flat, and all of the
Hmm.
glasses start shattering.
Yes.
That was just perfect comedy at each time. And just the the attention to detail in those scenes too. The
Yeah.
costumes are so grand.
Incredible
The
costumes.
sets and production going on behind her, as you remember that this is all on a stage at some club, and it's just put on so well. Yeah, it was so cool to see this more sexy kind of
Yeah.
irresistible side of her versus running around in a field or singing about a little bit of sugar and laughter makes the medicine go down and all that stuff.
Yeah. This is a little bit of spice, if you will,
Yes.
to counteract that sugar.
Yes.
Yeah, also the Shady Dame from Seville performance, I think, is just an incredible vocal from her. Again,
Totally.
some of the notes that she hits are so like out of this world. And I also think that's a scene where she's like, breaking the fourth wall and just like
Mhm.
directly singing to the camera and is just so, I don't know, she's just cool.
She
I don't know if
is.
you ever associate like Julie Andrews with like a sense of like coolness in that sense. She's obviously great, but like, it's a different kind of flavor of
Mhm.
Julie with also the right hint of camp with it too, that I
Totally.
think
She was hot.
is really sweet.
She was
Yeah.
hot in this
Let's
movie.
just say
Like,
it. She was
she was
hot.
hot.
Hot girl shit.
And she knew she was the shit too,
Yes.
as she embraced the stage scenes. I mean, it's just
Mhm.
exuding so much confidence despite being involved in like the craziest plan of all time.
Right. Yeah, and I think combining the great vocal singing and the chemistry with Robert Preston, I also think their duet that they have together is just really charming, and you just see like this sort of, I don't know, like a mutual sort of respect that they have for each other. And then of course it just descends into chaos after that because for some reason this film has like multiple scenes that break out into fights.
Yes.
Because that's just the vibe of 1930s Paris, I guess. Um, but then all that leads to her kissing King Marchand, the James Garner character, which I don't know if I fully buy on either end, to be honest. I don't know
Mhm.
if they have, again, that much chemistry together. The scene after that, where they are implied to have had sex, is interesting, where
Yeah.
she kind of is realizing that the predicament that they're in is like she's going to keep doing this thing that she's very good at, which is pretending to be a man, pretending to be a female impersonator. But that would sort of reflect something that this guy doesn't want to be. He doesn't want to
Mhm.
be seen as gay, so she's kind of trapped and sort of realizing that maybe they can't move forward, which I do think she kind of takes on with like a more of a maturity at this point in the film than maybe she would have in the beginning,
Mhm.
feeling like, oh, I'm actually at a comfortable place in my life and maybe I don't have to just give everything up just because this guy wants me to. So that's a
Yeah.
nice sort of arc for her.
And especially just how he was just always so aggressive. He always like had
Yeah.
this just meanness to him, whether he was doubting if the count was a man, if it's actually just a woman. And even then, I mean, there's that scene of them going into a gay dance club just to kind of like slow dance and have like some time, and he is so unbelievably uncomfortable to be in that space and
Yeah.
basically like, let's just go home. And I'm just like, but she just wanted to she just wanted to hang out for a little bit.
Yeah.
So I also was wondering, couldn't she have just put on a wig and big sunglasses and nobody would have recognized her?
A fair point. She's obviously fooled people before, so,
She's
you
done it
know.
once, she could do it again.
Yeah, right. So again, not my favorite plot line of this film, which I do think overall is really fun and
Yeah.
just like the sort of zippy energy of it really works. The Leslie Ann Warren character is obviously kind of a hoot. Again, all the Robert Preston stuff is great, but it's the romance stuff that sort of drags it down a little bit and sort
Yeah.
of I would have just preferred if it was just like, hey, it's me and Robert Preston, we're just gonna have fun with this ruse and that's it. That sort of thing. But it is what it is. So obviously by the end, when she shows up to sort of save the day for James Garner's character by revealing to Norma, the Leslie Ann Warren character, that she is in fact a woman, and her kind of like smile as she's undressing in front of Leslie Ann Warren is also really fun. There's obviously a whole plot line we didn't get into in this discussion about like stuff to do with James Garner and him being a gangster, but also not really. And it's all very complicated. But
It was very
either way,
complicated.
yeah. Either way, I think, Julie Andrews is just given more opportunity to be more complex. And I'm just glad that she got this opportunity ultimately and that it worked out.
And Robert Preston gives her a little bit of a run for her money at the end as he takes the lead in the Seville type song and dance
Yes.
number. That was such a great note to end on. I mean, that just
Hmm.
perfectly captures the silliness of this film that you stuck through for nearly 2.5 hours. And
Totally.
I love that they ended it that way.
I agree. Yeah, maybe it does ultimately like steal a little bit of Julie Andrews' thunder ultimately in the end, but still, yeah, really, really fun movie. Highly recommend for people who haven't seen it. And I
Definitely.
think it holds up pretty well because like there's always a little bit of danger when you're watching, like a Hollywood production dealing with themes like this that is going to be a little dated or like making jokes at people's expense that
Mhm.
doesn't really age well. But I think this does, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I thought so too. I feel like it's more campy, as you said. It's not
Hmm.
necessarily I don't know, poking and prodding and
Right.
doing
Right.
anything that seems to me at least to be too offensive. And yeah, it's just
Yeah.
a good time. That's what I felt
Hmm.
pretty much as I summed it up. I was like, this was just a really good time and
Yeah.
a break in the heaviness that a lot of the movies of this year dealt with, as you also mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one nice thing is whenever we get a nice light comedy in this category because yeah, we don't always get that, as we know. So, anything else on Julie Andrews before we move on?
Julie Andrews, you will always be hot. End of
Yeah.
sentence.
Julie Andrews, you will always be famous. Uh, okay, let's move on to hard pivot into Jessica Lange
Oh yes.
in Francis. a lot, a lot to unpack with this one. Um,
Definitely.
First of all, this is our first of two introductions for this episode and to the Oscars, Jessica Lange. So she is going to be a bit of a mainstay for a little while on this show, where we'll talk about her three more times this season, and then we'll cover her Best Actress win in '94. She wins Supporting Actress this year, 1982, for Tootsie. We can get into that maybe a little bit later, but Jessica Lange, she was born in Minnesota. She eventually found her way to HB Studio in New York, where she studied acting. She was also a model, and she was discovered in her modeling by Dino De Laurentiis, who wanted her for the 1976 remake of King Kong, which ended up being her film debut. And unlike some others that we've talked about, her debut was not exactly embraced
Mm.
positively, pretty much at all. She got a lot of pans for that performance, but as would have it, she did end up winning the Golden Globe for New Star of the Year. So I don't know. I guess people still did see the potential. And then Bob Fosse cast her to play the Angel of Death in All That Jazz, which I think is a really strong supporting turn from her. She was in The Postman Always Rings Twice. Graham Clifford, who was inspired by her performance to cast her as the lead of his film, which was Frances. And so Frances is a biopic about the actress Frances Farmer, who worked in old Hollywood and on the stage, but she frequently got into conflict with those around her, to put it mildly.
Yes.
Uh, she has a very restless spirit, and eventually this all spiraled after she developed these addictions to drugs and alcohol and wound up in multiple psychiatric hospitals. And the film tells the story of her life growing up as a kind of rebel, going through her Hollywood years, her theater years, her addictions, the psychiatric institutions. There's a lot to unpack with this one, as I said. So let's talk Frances and Jessica Lange. Yeah, thoughts on the great Jessica Lange and her very demanding work here as Frances.
Very much so. I was reading that she kind of put her whole being into this movie to try to
Yeah.
perfectly capture the many ups and downs that Frances Farmer had. And I mean, it's a really fascinating story. And I just felt for her the entire time. It's funny to me because, as I said, I'm a huge Jessica Lange fan, and I adore her in American Horror Story and all the seasons that she was involved in. And so many of the mannerisms that I love of her in the TV show, I see like the early stages of them in
Yeah.
here. The way she loves smoking on a cigarette and is like one of the best
Ugh,
to do it. Her and Sarah Paulson are the best to ever do it.
I know.
And then just like, she like always takes like a little bit of the like tobacco or whatever it might be that comes on her tongue. And just these facial expressions that she has, she really delivers a really, really great performance in this film. The story is chaotic at times in terms of everything that this poor woman had gone through. I know that there might be some discrepancies between reality and what is covered in the film, such as things that happen while she's in psychiatric units. But regardless of that, I think she is stellar in this movie. And it would have been crazy if she won for this year and Tootsie. I mean, that would have been such an awesome night for her. But
Yeah.
I think this was, really think that this was kind of the start when people really realize the potential that Jessica Lange has. And I'm glad of that because we've been gifted with so many amazing performances from her. And she can be sweet in one moment and feisty and angry and lash out at you in the next, as seen in Frances. And so
Mhm.
this one I was as pleasantly surprised about, because I admit I had not known of Frances Farmer prior to this, nor her story. And I guess you never really know with a biopic. It's not to say that this is like the greatest biopic of all time. I do have some problems here and there with it,
Yeah.
but
Hmm.
she sells it. As does her Kim Stanley. I know she was also nominated for this in the
Hmm.
supporting actress race, and they're such a duo in this.
Yeah, absolutely. Jessica Lange is also a favorite of mine. She is, for me, another one of those actresses who really goes for it,
Hmm.
you know? And even if not every performance fully lands, I do always appreciate just like the level of drama that she can bring to a role, just like the gravitas that she has, and also like that inner sort of turmoil that her characters have. Yeah, I think obviously nowadays she's very well known at this point for that second wind of her career on TV
Right.
as this sort of grand dame sort of actress. And I'm glad that that actually happened for her because it really did introduce her to a whole new generation who maybe never would have really known about her or appreciated her otherwise.
Hmm.
And I do think, yeah, agreed, sort of her work on American Horror Story, honestly, through all those first four seasons is incredible. The way that she can carry a one liner is just unparalleled. Her cigarette acting, amazing.
You know what
Yeah.
I always think of, there's not going to be a pool, you stupid slut, or whatever she says in the first season.
Yes.
I'm just always
Classic.
thinking of that, or her and Coven when she's getting ready and they're like, "What should I tell people?" And she's like, "Wear something black." And she just cows out of that room like that.
Who's the
She-
baddest witch in town?
That's right.
Yes.
She is just devilishly good in everything.
Yes.
Whether
That's a
she
good word for it,
Yeah,
honestly.
whether
Devilishly.
whether she is trying to be the little minx that she is or not, she always brings out that feistiness, and I just appreciate it. And she's such a great she has great facial expressions, not only in this film, but really in anything. She conveys everything so well via her
Yeah,
face. And I think
totally.
that's like a whole skill in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And I do think that American Horror Story did go downhill once she left,
Yeah.
just saying. But that's another story. I do think she sort of started to become a little typecast, even on her own show, as
Yeah.
that sort of like theatrical grand dame kind of person,
Yeah.
which I do think she's capable of so much more. And I think Frances is, the perfect film to show somebody that she really had so much range,
Mhm.
especially at this time in her career. This is just one of those films that requires so much of the lead actress, like
Mhm.
full like body and soul basically. And the journey that she has to go through from that sort of innocent childlike rebel in the beginning to then like all of the shit that she goes through just with her just trying to be herself basically, like,
Mhm.
and all the crying and screaming and being tortured and like dealing with all this internal struggle, dealing with family and her career. There's so much going on in this film, which I do think can definitely be meandering at times. But she is so in control of her character from the first minute, and I think remains compelling all the way through however long, like 140 minutes of the film. The way that she's able to just kind of evolve into a more like a more mature and also more cynical version of herself,
Mhm.
but also still maintaining that rebellious kind of spirit. And again, her inner pain, the way she can communicate what's going on inside of her, her restlessness, I think is really, really remarkable. And to do all that while not making it feel cliche. Like, I feel like this could very easily have boiled over into like camp or parody, even with how over the top all this drama is here. But she just has this great sense of sort of feeling like she's always in the present, like never seeming like she's calculated in her acting style, like always sort of responding to her scene partners the right way and just sort of visibly showing everything that's going on inside of her.
The one thing that struck me the entire time was how grounded she felt and remained throughout
Yeah,
the movie, from like what, a 16-year-old who is like basically writing a communist manifesto of some
about how there is
sort.
no God.
Yes.
Yes.
To just living it up as this fresh, young, hot face in the theater world, and most heartbreakingly, her mother pushing her to keep going in Hollywood and living out the mother's dreams that she always wished that she could do, but now she can force her daughter to do. It's just all these ups and downs, and you keep rooting for her. You just want her to get out or to find her footing. And it's interesting to see her by the end of the film, kind of what it all leads to and
Yeah.
how different she is. So
Hmm.
again, some things that probably did not actually happen in reality, but they make for good drama on the screen.
Oh yeah, there's so many great moments that she has. I think the moment that she comes back to her hometown for the premiere of her movie and she sees that woman who said that she was going to hell for like
Yes,
denouncing religion in her high school essay, and the woman is there again and is sort of being like, hey, we're so glad to have you and all that. And the way that Frances is just like, excuse me, haven't we met before?
hmm,
Weren't you the one that damned me straight to hell?
yes,
And she just says it with such kind of like a delight. She doesn't ham it up at all, but she's clearly sort of like reveling in this horrible woman being embarrassed
totally.
and the idea of getting back at her.
We need more movie stars like that. I need more bitchy
Yeah.
encounters.
Absolutely. And I love just the kind of, again, that inner turmoil that she channels, like when it's clear she wants to express her anger, but chooses not to, or has like those sort of like glanted, like amused glances, and her playing with her hands,
Hmm.
that sort of thing. Like, I think she's like vocalizing those inner emotions at one point with someone I don't remember. It might have been her first husband, I think, but
Hmm.
she asks him if like if he ever gets angry, and like she's looking for someone to understand her,
Hmm.
but there's always that block there. Like for some reason she just doesn't have that person in her life that she can really bounce ideas off of, other than the one guy after that. But like he shows up here and there, like he's not a
Yeah,
consistent presence in her life, and so
yeah,
she's just kind of like adrift, honestly, for
yeah.
so much of the film.
And yeah, those anger scenes, I mean, just how explosive she can get in a minute is
Hmm.
honestly terrifying. I would be really afraid of
Yeah,
her. I
I
think
know.
I think of mainly the scenes that she shares with her mom, and just how things go from 0 to 100 before she even walks through the door. Like they both basically know, all right, let's get ready for this. Who is going to come out as
Hmm.
victor here? And the one big scene that they share where Jessica, like pushes her mother against the wall and like takes her away. I mean, that was just, it was heartbreaking to watch that, just knowing how much pain both of them felt, but one of them was very much more so inflicting that pain onto her daughter, for example, because she's pushing her
Hmm.
to be in Hollywood, and there's this constant problem between them. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true. The fight that with her mother, who again is like by the end kind of wanting her to revive her film career, even
Mhm.
after everything she's been through, basically keeping her own dream alive. The mother living vicariously through her, as we see time and time again in Hollywood, the stage mothers. And then Frances, like, just wanting to give it all up because that's what she thinks is probably best for her mental health, which is probably true, and her mother just doesn't seem to care. It's really heartbreaking, and it yeah, that physical altercation where she says that she'll kill her mother and she's like choking her is so raw, so upsetting. For me, it like barely even looks like acting anymore. It looks like this is actually happening. And yeah, they are both bringing it. Her and Kim Stanley, who we talked about with Seance on a Wet Afternoon way back
Mm,
in 64. This is one of her only other film roles. And she was known for being a very intense actress herself, very,
mm.
method actor, tough to work with. And there's just a lot of rage flowing between the both of them. And kind of like you were saying, you're kind of frightened ultimately in the scenes that they share together.
I mean, when she said that she would kill her mother, I said, honestly, I believe it. You look like
Yeah.
you hate this person with a fury inside of you.
Yeah, and maybe you deserve to have those feelings.
Yeah,
Not deserve,
I
but like your feelings are warranted.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, all the stuff obviously where she's like showing up 4 hours late to filming, and the
Hmm.
crew is kind of giving her shit for it, especially when the hairstylist says something about how, like, oh, you're losing your hair already. And she just explodes in this such a volatile way and curses them all out, assaulting the hairstylist. And it's just like all this contained anger is just pouring out of her in this moment, and it is over the top. You can't deny that it's like heightened emotions here, but it doesn't feel like we're like stretching to like give this woman an Oscar kind of performance to me,
Right.
you know.
Yes, and when she's admitted to that, or involuntarily admitted to that psychiatric unit at the end, I really love the sass that she brings in that scene where it's her and the, like, either director of this place or, somebody who is leading this program, how
Hmm.
she is basically like, I'm going to give you so much shit and so much hell because you're making me do this, and you are going to be in a worse position than me. It's just, it's hard to see the things that she has to go through, because every time she does manage to get out and re-immerse herself back into her reality, it becomes so toxic with her mother. And her mother ultimately has, it's basically like a conservatorship where
Yeah,
she
that's what I
basically,
thought too.
yeah,
Yeah.
where she's basically telling exactly what she can do with her money and where she can go. And you just feel her being so strangled, and that free spirit that she is is suffocating underneath it all. And I mean, that's what's kind of leading to all of these explosive episodes and her running away in the middle of the night. But even then, so she comes back because she is lost and doesn't necessarily know what's right and what
Yeah.
she can do. There's so much cognitive dissonance going on between what she wants to do versus what she thinks she can do, and just the drama between her relationship with her mother. At one point she constantly tells her how much she loves her, deep down she still loves her, but then she screams in her face how much she hates her, and that's like the nail in the coffin.
Yeah, and that's the heartbreaking part is that, like when she's even like fighting back against the police at one point and just not really even taking them seriously at all, which is fun to watch, but like that this is going to end poorly
Yeah,
for her,
yeah.
and having her full on like breakdown outside the courtroom is just one scene after another that
Mhm.
she just knocks out of the park, I think, because it's like at a certain point, she just feels like she has nothing left to lose. She's got nothing. She's got no one. She's burned bridges. So now she's just gonna have to gonna do whatever the hell she wants, like say whatever she wants. And it's like like a train wreck ultimately that you can't really look away from. And I think as a performance, she is just so uninhibited here and just like dives fully into each of these scenes without a whole lot of vanity. Like she's not
Mhm.
afraid to get ugly in
Mhm.
certain moments and make you feel like, I don't know if I'm even on this woman's side anymore watching her and what she's been doing. Even if
Definitely.
cognizant, like you said, like, and you understand what she's been through and why she's acting this way, but like she's also taking it a little far at times with how she
Def-
talks to people.
Definitely. I wonder, for Jessica Lange herself, I can just imagine how difficult of a film this was to first immerse yourself into, but then to try to shake off. And I know, I mean,
Yeah.
she was like physically and mentally spent doing this movie, which I can believe it.
Yeah.
And so it's nice that she was able to take a lighter role in Tootsie, which was her second
Right.
nomination for the supporting actress race, and get a bit of a reward with that.
Hmm.
But yeah, this was just one of many entries that shows her range as an actor and what she can do in one project, let alone over a decades long career that she's had. So she's a treasure.
Yeah. And also, Kim Stanley is actually the one who encouraged her to be like, Jessica, you need to take on a comedy after this.
If
So
Stanley,
that's why she
who
did Tootsie.
if method actor Stanley is the one telling you that you should listen to her.
Absolutely. Yes. Obviously, we've talked about a lot of the big explosive moments, but I do think she shines equally as much in those more, gentle or subtle touches in the film. And like, like her desperation to leave the facility at one point, I think is really heartbreaking because you could see her trying to like negotiate with the doctor and like
Mhm.
present herself as a more sober person now. But then when he doesn't really respond to that, she just falls apart and
Yeah,
just practically begs him to release her.
yeah.
And, obviously after that, it's like because she tries so hard to be in control of her life, she then gets her old flame Harry to help bust her out. And yeah, the whole conservativeship, like again, it's just like everything is kind of snowballing in her life and she can't stay in place at all. So yeah, I feel like this would be a very, very tough role to shake,
Mhm.
honestly.
Mhm.
So kudos to her for getting through it. I think by the end of the film, after she's been lobotomized, is just, again, that's another scene that's tough to watch, but she goes for it
Yeah.
again, not shying away from any of those uncomfortable feelings and really making you feel like this is all just like a living hell for her.
I'm always very fascinated by the act of lobotomization and why
Mm,
people did that and why they thought
yeah.
that that was like the cure for basically everything. So whenever it's used in a film, I feel like that kind of like piques up my interest even more. And so when we got to
Mm,
that point when it's this classroom demonstration setting to show you just put a little pick right here in the eye and go and they're basically fine. The nerves are severed. And way back when everyone was like, ah, yes, that is the cure.
yes, this is the way.
Let's just sever very necessary nerves that totally disinhibit you to do anything for the rest of your life. Um,
Yep.
so yes, this is a very interesting topic for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
As she,
especially
as she also,
doing it for women,
yes, yes,
happened to a lot of women,
yes,
unfortunately.
and as I believe as happened in American Horror Story Asylum, I think they had some
That's
lobotomy
right.
going on, if not all the electroshock therapies.
Yeah.
Fun times.
I'm not gonna lie, I did think of the episode of her when she was with the other patients.
Hmm.
I very much thought of that while watching some of those psychiatric scenes here. Just saying.
The name game.
The name game. I wanted them to just bust out the name game here.
Yes,
That would have been some nice levity in this
I
harrowing
agree.
film.
She seems to have some fun times as she's bonding with the other women in the psychiatric unit. We see like one moment where she's like acting up her actress name and showing, and
Yeah,
everybody like eyeing her because they're like, oh my God, this is a movie star. And then we
right.
see very terrible men doing very, very terrible things because what's she gonna do? She's locked up here. I have the power. Yeah, very, very tough watch in many instances.
Yeah, for sure. And then the final scene we get where she meets Harry again, like a decade later, I think is very bittersweet because she seems to be in a more, at least, stable place in her life, but there's also kind of like a spacey quality to her, like when she's talking to him,
Hmm.
where it feels like a lot of the life that she had has just been sapped out of her.
Yeah.
And it's just really really tough to watch, but she communicates all of that with so much empathy, I think, for this character, for this person and what she's been through.
Hmm.
So really remarkable work, just totally running the gamut of emotion. Maybe we'll talk about this a little bit when we get to the Oscar discussion, but I do wonder if it may have been too intense for certain voters.
Mm.
Combining like the Hollywood stuff is a little dark, and then also just everything else that's going on in the film is just like a lot to go through.
Hmm.
So more on that later. Anything else on Jessica before we move on?
No, I mean, just again, just such an awesome actress, and it was really exciting to visit these
Yeah,
first nominations of hers.
totally. All right, well, let's move on to our next nominee, Miss Sissy Spacek in Missing. So, Sissy Spacek coming back very shortly after her win for Coal Miner's Daughter, another classic case, I think, of an Afterglow nomination. And after her win, she had Raggedy Man in 1981, which she probably came close for. She got a Golden Globe nomination for that. And then Missing comes out, which is this very well reviewed political drama directed by Costa Gavras, famous for the film Z, which came out in 1969, did really well, got nominated for Best Picture. And Missing ends up winning the Palme d'Or at Cannes. And so it's a very buzzy film at the time, and it's about a real life event in which a journalist named Charlie went missing while reporting on the ground in Chile amid the military coup in 1973. So his wife Beth, played by Sissy Spacek, is very anti-establishment and is very cynical about whether the American embassy is really all that interested in helping to find him, even thinking that they might have actually just let it happen because of their own political motivations. And then Charlie's father, played by Jack Lemmon, flies to Chile to try and find him. And he's much more conservative and trusting in the American government, so he and Beth clash because of their ideologies. But as they sort of are trying in vain to find Charlie, he starts to lose his own faith as well. So let's talk Sissy Spacek. Thoughts on another great enduring actress here, Sissy Spacek, and her performance here in Missing?
Well, I want to start off by saying how awesome it is to see the longevity of her career. I mean, obviously, we were all pretty much introduced and in awe of her when it comes to Carrie, and just
Yes.
gosh, the force that she brings to that movie, the creepy, crawly nature of it, just how
Her eyes.
her
Yeah.
eyes, her presence. I mean, all of that is just insane. I don't have a better word, but it's insane in that film. And to have seen her be able to take on a number of projects versus, maybe just people wanting to typecast her as like the horror girl or write her off
Mm-hmm.
as not a great performer. So it's really cool to have seen her constantly get such great roles. And this one was very interesting. I've seen a number of films about the either revolutions or military governmental takeovers in South America because unfortunately many countries have dealt with that and gone through it or are currently going through it. So this was an interesting film to kind of look at that lens through. Of course, it's more so on the impacts on an American writer and an American family versus looking at the everyday people who are going through this. So, you have that aspect to it. In all honesty, I felt like this was much more of a showcase for Jack Lemmon as the father who is trying to bring his boy back and understand his son, who he, as you said, he was pretty much all the opposite of him. He's like, that's not the boy I raised, and he doesn't understand Sissy Spacek's character either, and why she was with this man, and why they decided to live in South America, especially during this tumultuous time in Chile. So I felt it was more so a movie for Jack Lemmon to showcase his emotions. That being said, though, I do think Sissy did well with what she was given. I just wish it was more in terms of her character just having more to her and not just kind of being like the angry, devastated wife, which rightfully she should be and would be in this instance. But I just kind of needed a little bit more layers to her and better understanding of who she is and not just this guy's wife and going along for the ride with him. That's kind of the main takeaway that I had from it. But I think she and Jack play so well opposite each other because they are at such odds and constantly clashing. But as time goes by, you can see both of them easing up around each other and not being as explosive. And there are definitely a lot of scenes where they're just both so full of desperation and are just trying to find her husband, his son, and you can just feel that pain that they both share in that moment. So there are a lot of really moving moments in here, a lot of ones that, make you hold your breath a bit when you see the atrocities that happened during that time. And yeah, I just wish that there was a little bit more for Sissy Spacek in the script.
Yeah, I agree. This is one where I think Sissy Spacek is very good and she performs well in the role and what it requires. But I also think, to be frank, it's not a very memorable performance.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with the script, which I think it's a very well written film. I think it's very well structured, like where it feels like there's like a lot of chaos going on in the beginning, but then it gradually is coming together by the end. So it's well structured, but I also think it starts to lose its way a little bit in terms of centering her story, because it becomes, like you said, so much about Ed, Jack Lemmon's character, and his own disillusionment with everything, and she kind of disappears into the background. I do like that we're seeing a slightly different side to her compared to her other nominations up to this point. She still is kind of like scrappy, lovable in that specific, Sissy Spacek way.
Yeah.
And, obviously like her one scene at the beginning with Charlie, we see just in her expression that in her eyes, like she just has so much love for him, and that's very strong. But then she also still has the love of the causes that they share a passion for. And when she's like sensing the danger and all of that in the beginning, I think that's very well played. Same thing when he actually does go missing. She doesn't overplay it very much. But there are also other moments where I'm like, is she giving enough?
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that even what is asked of her to give a more emotive performance? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hate to say that nobody necessarily like deserves an Oscar nomination. This one was, as I was watching it, I was really wondering what stood apart with her performance here, because I don't know, I just didn't feel, like as you said, it just didn't feel like enough. And honestly, it just kind of felt like a very standard portrayal, nothing too memorable or too catch your eye that you can't look away. I don't mind her in this movie whatsoever. I mean, like I said, I really, really like her as a performer, and I like her moments with Jack Lemmon. It was just kind of more so like I'm not at the forefront. She's not at the forefront of this movie for me. I think there are some really well edited scenes going on. I think the cinematography is pretty great in the way it captures a lot of the turmoil. That one scene in the beginning, actually, when it's either her or her husband who are out past curfew and they're kind of like running, trying to find safe spaces. That's really scary to watch. And I think those are all of the really great aspects of this film. I know it won Best Adapted Screenplay at the Oscars for that year. So people loved the writing of this. But yeah, she felt more so like one of the things more at the back of my mind in terms of what makes this movie great. And I hate to say it, Sissy, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I think that is kind of a little bit of the struggle when it comes to assessing some performances here and just in general, where it's like, they're doing a great job. They're fulfilling what the role requires. We're not saying this is a bad performance. It's just like, I don't know if this is top 5 of the entire year, 1982, in Best Actress. And that's okay. It's not like a fault of hers by any means. She says in her book, actually, that literally the day after she won her Oscar for Coal Miner's Daughter, she flew to Mexico to film this movie. So she's just in like lots going on in Sissy Spacek's world at the time. But she also has a quote where she said, "I needed a lot of hugs during that film. It was emotionally exhausting trying to imagine what these characters were feeling. I worried myself sick." And then she actually said that she was surprised by how easy it was, by contrast, for Jack Lemmon to just like turn it on and off. And he gave her like this really lovely advice where he said, "You know, you're really good, kid, but you should trust yourself more. The scene
Mm,
will either work or it won't, and no amount of thrashing and flailing around will help.
that's
Go
good.
easy on yourself. You know what to do, so just do it."
It's a good advice.
Yeah, from an old Hollywood legend to the new generation, I think that's very good advice.
Sometimes less is more. And in a lot of times you find really great performances in the subtleties and the quiet that people possess in certain moments.
Yeah. So I think, I can definitely understand where some of those nerves are coming from. And
Hmm.
she said she really was trying to understand her character on a deeper level, but sometimes it was difficult for her. And I do think sometimes you can see a little bit of that, like not always knowing exactly the right frequency, maybe at times to play it. But again, I do think her scenes that she shares with Jack Lemmon are really fascinating to watch, not only from character perspective, but again, old Hollywood, new Hollywood kind of situation here that is really reflecting of their characters themselves.
Hmm.
The sort of iciness with her anti-establishment politics and him really valuing those more idealistic American ideals. And I think she does play it with a more of a hard edge, I think, than we've seen in like Carrie or Coal Miner's Daughter, which are much more innocent kinds of characters. And here she's a little spikier, a little more on edge and maybe more complex in some ways. I don't know, not always,
Yes.
but when it comes to like dealing with like the embassy and everything and the other officials and not taking anything that they say at
Hmm.
face value, not even really all that open to what they have to say. Ultimately, she is right in the end, but it is just fun to sort of see her in a little bit more of like a assertive light, I guess, like pushing back and sort of dismissing.
Yeah, crossing her arms and be like, "Oh yeah, hi, General, whatever your name is," or whatever it
Right.
might be,
Yeah.
and they'll say one thing, and she's like, "Oh really? Is that what happened? I don't believe that for a second." And then Ed is always like, "Why do you have to be like that?" And she's like, "You don't understand. You don't
Right.
understand the United States' role in all of this, and frankly, in many other situations that are happening in South America." But that's a conversation for a different day.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's fun. It's fun to see Sissy Spacek Spunky. That's
Yeah.
officially her nickname, Spunky Spacek.
Hmm. Yes.
um, but I also love that one scene where they're returning back to their hotel and they're just like yelling at each other outside of the hotel
Hmm.
rooms, and then she eventually comes over and knocks on his door and she's like, "Hey, I'm sorry about what happened, blah blah blah," and nothing from
Yeah.
his side. So that was one of the better scenes, I would say.
Yeah. And then going back to her own room and she's like, "I blew it, me and my big mouth."
Mhm.
Like that's very, very well played. And again, just like a lot of this dynamic reminds me so much of just how like nothing has really changed. Like we've always had these kind of generational battles,
Yeah.
him saying like she and her generation are handed everything and then like complain about the establishment when they get bored. And then her saying like you have too much faith in these political systems that don't have your best interest at heart, and that like the older generation is kind of clueless about what's really going on out
Mhm.
there. And it's like you could transport this same conversation to like your average family argument in 2023 and
Truly,
nothing has changed.
what the baby boomers have to say about.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
I'm sure they're enjoying the luxuries of Social Security, while the
Right.
same politicians of their generation are like trying to get rid of it or doing a host of a number and one different things. Yes, I thought so too. I was like,
Yeah.
"Yep, this is uncle and niece arguing about something at
Totally.
the Christmas table or dinner table, whatever it might be.
Yeah, but I do think she really holds her own against him.
Hmm.
And she has like this confidence in her beliefs that does feel grounded, but it also feels very much like that younger person who is still like a little obnoxious about it all, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like they're just really going for it in a way that's like, okay, you can maybe take it down a few notches a little if we're really trying to have a real debate here. But I think they're very well matched, as odd as they are together.
Yes.
And then obviously, as things go along, her kind of tearing up when she's given the opportunity to like make this statement in front of that huge crowd, hoping that he might be among that crowd, I think is a really nice touch, because I
Yeah.
feel like she by that point she's been so caught up in just like the act of finding him and helping Ed to find him that it's like she hasn't really properly grieved or
Hmm.
like processed that he's missing and doesn't have a great chance of being found at this point.
Yeah.
And like when her voice kind of gives out in that moment that I noticed, I think that's a really affecting moment.
Hmm.
So again, like we get these little moments, but then I don't know if it really adds up at the end of the day. I also think the scene where they go to that building that's full of all the dead bodies
Oh, yes.
is very affecting.
Yeah, that is probably the one that sticks out to me most visually in my mind, just how
Yeah.
unnerving that must be to be walking around like hundreds of corpses that are basically just laid out on the floor, waiting to be
And bloodied. Yeah.
yeah, waiting to be identified, or, have already been identified, and you're kind of like, well, what happens? Do the families get the bodies? It's a very unnerving situation to walk into.
Right. And then when I think she sees like a friend
Yeah.
among the dead bodies,
Yeah.
and the way she sees that, it's like this uh, like kind of like that out of breath sort of
Yeah.
release that she has. It's not just like a standard sort of crying
Hmm.
reaction.
Hmm.
I thought that was pretty profound.
Yeah.
But then yeah, I do think the film does drop the ball on her emotional arc beyond that, where it
Hmm.
does become so much about Jack Lemmon and his situation and him having to accept the truth and everything. And I think he's fantastic. I think this is maybe one of his best performances, honestly,
Mm.
but it is very much at the detriment of her own
Yeah.
journey through that entire third act, honestly.
Yeah. We don't need to know
So,
anything about the wife.
yes, what does she care? Yeah. So that's disappointing, I would say.
Yeah.
But strong, solid work from Sissy. Far from the worst we've seen in this category.
I would
Leave it at
agree.
that. Yes. Anything else before we move on to our final losing nominee?
No, I think that's it on Miss Spunky.
Okay, Miss Spunky, here we go. Let's go to Debra Winger in An Officer and a Gentleman. So Debra Winger is our other introduction for this week. She gets 3 Oscar nominations in total as of now that she has, all in lead actress. So Debra Winger was born in Ohio, and I was actually reading about how she actually suffered a cerebral hemorrhage when she was
Oh, wow.
18, which left her blind and partially paralyzed for almost a year. And then
Wow.
she got it back somehow, and she decided after that point, because she had a lot to think about during that experience, that I am going to dedicate my life to being an actress, what I've always wanted to do, and take that risk and go to Hollywood and try to make it. And it worked out
I think you
ultimately.
did. Yes.
Yes, yes. Her first role was in a movie called Slumber Party 57, not entirely acclaimed, but she went on to do some TV roles in things like Wonder Woman, and she had a pretty solid breakout with Urban Cowboy in 1980, for which she was nominated at the Golden Globes and at BAFTA. And then she further broke out with this film, An Officer and a Gentleman. So the film is about Navy officer candidate Zach Mayo, played by Richard Gere. Feels like we're fully in the 80s now. We have Richard Gere as our leading man. But
Absolutely.
we are following him as he goes through training and also gets into a romantic relationship with Paula, a local factory worker played by Debra Winger, and she helps him to overcome some of the traumas in his past and also I guess, some of the new traumas in his present. So let's talk Debra Winger. What are your thoughts on Debra Winger as an actress and her first Oscar nomination here?
Yes, she's an interesting gal because I've heard a lot of like drama with her behind the scenes on
Yes.
movies. Uh, Famously has some beef with Shirley MacLaine and the things
Hmm.
that were allegedly happening on the set of Terms of Endearment. And then I also heard that she was very difficult to work with in An Officer and a Gentleman. Actually, no, she just did not like this movie, and I don't think she like did any press for it or refused to do press.
Yes.
I can't
And her and
remember.
Richard Gere didn't get along.
Of
Yeah.
course. So
Yeah.
she's fascinating to me. I love someone who is just such a bitch and still beloved. Since
Yeah.
that's what I'm getting from Deborah.
It's giving Faye Dunaway.
It's
Yeah.
giving Faye Dunaway. There we go.
Yep.
As I said, An Officer and a Gentleman always is on cable, and I know that my mom has watched this movie, I'm sure, a couple of times. However, she'll skip it at this point because she's like, "Who is still watching this movie?" So I got to tell her that I was still watching the movie
There you go.
for this podcast. Um, I had only really known that this movie was like a chick flick and like for to really fall in love. I don't really know if I bought it all. I can't say that I bought the romance between her and Richard Gere, although they actually their characters had some pretty decent chemistry. Or I should say that the two of them play like they have good chemistry,
Right.
despite all the drama behind the scenes, which
Hmm.
means very good actors. Um,
Right.
but similarly, like in Missing with Sissy Spacek, I very much felt like Debra Winger in An Officer and a Gentleman was like not really like a forethought for the writers. I know that she is literally involved in the main love story with Richard Gere, but it's like I don't know, it doesn't seem like very deep, like a very deep role for her or even much time spent on their romance. It just kind of happens as they meet up as he's in his naval training program. I really didn't realize how much of this movie would be dedicated to the training sequences and just having to deal with this, really tough drill and Sergeant Foley and how much he would be like bogging down on these people. Although that actor Louis Gossett Jr. He was great in that role, so he was always
Yeah.
very
Our
fun to
supporting
watch.
actor winner. Yep.
Yes, yes. So yeah, it was just kind of like it was another instance where I thought, why was she nominated for this film?
Hmm. And also, maybe why was she nominated in Best Actress and not Supporting Actress?
I would agree with
Perhaps.
that.
Hmm.
Perhaps. Yeah, it was just I can't say that I was like overly impressed with the performance that I saw. Not saying that it was terrible or anything. There are definitely moments where she is dealing with heartbreak with Zach Mayo, Richard Gere's
Hmm.
character, and trying to, I guess, understand where the future of their relationship. It does end in a very satisfactory way, which always will sweep women off their feet and all. But just overall, it kind of felt like I feel like any other actress probably could have brought this role to
Hmm.
life. I don't know. I'm trying to just trying
Yeah.
to convey that it wasn't anything too overly special, in my opinion.
Right. That's fair. Yeah. So I really enjoy Debra Winger's work in general. She
Mhm.
is another one of those actresses who takes her craft seriously, like Faye Dunaway. And because of that, she does get that reputation where people
Mhm.
have called her difficult. We'll get to it next week with Terms of Endearment with Shirley MacLaine and her accepted speech calling Deborah turbulent brilliance of Debra Winger. I'm not saying she's blameless, like if she did say certain things or do things that were a bit too much, but it does just bring up the same sort of discussions that we've been having for a little bit about how actresses are criticized, where with male actors, it's like, oh, it's part of their process.
He's
He's
just
just
getting into
serious about his
character.
art,
Mhm.
right? Yeah, exactly. But I do think she is a very compelling screen presence, and I do think this film is a good example of that. And because she has so little to do compared to, not only the other nominees here, but like the script itself.
Hmm.
For me, she has a really good intuition
Hmm.
with how to bring her character of Paula to life, even when, in the grand scheme of things, we really don't know all that much about her at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like, this is definitely a case where I do think she would probably be submitted in supporting nowadays. She is not the focus of the film. There is a version of this story that completely takes out this entire storyline, and there's still plenty of material with Zach and going through his training and like having this other friendship with Sid. Like, she is, for all intents and purposes, the love interest, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And we really hadn't had another one of these at this point in Oscar history since like Talia Shire and Rocky back in
Mm.
76.
Hmm.
So I do think that is encouraging that we don't have a lot of them. But also, I don't know that she is fully able to overcome some of the script's shortcomings for
Hmm.
her when it comes to Paula, for me to feel like this is like an obviously fully deserving nomination. You know
This
what I mean?
Yeah, this movie, just in general, this movie walked so Top Gun can run, because Top Gun pretty
Oh,
much
yeah.
has like the same structure if you think about it.
Yeah.
Naval, or some guy working with the Marines falls in love with woman, has all
Hmm.
this crazy stuff going on with their tumultuous relationship. A wingman who also goes through tumultuous times. Um,
Yep.
yeah, I should be not as tough maybe on Debra Winger in this movie as I started talking about it, because she does not give a bad performance. Like I
Yeah.
said, she and Richard Gere play really well off of each other. I mean, I couldn't help but smile at some of their scenes together where they're kind of being like a silly couple and teasing
Yeah.
each other and just laughing. I mean, all of that was really lovely to see. It's just more so my issues with the script and the fact that she just feels so two-dimensional, and it's always about his problems and what he's going through and the things that he has gone through in his life, whereas we just really only know that she works at this factory with her mom. Her and her friend go out to meet the naval officers in training, and there's always the talk about like being trapped by these women, and you don't want to get them pregnant because then you can never get
Hmm.
out of that relationship and all that stuff.
Yep.
So it's just very much not focused on her, and she
Yep.
is not the main character here whatsoever.
That's the thing. It's like before she's even on screen, she is like sort of introduced as one of those dangerous women who can get
Hmm.
pregnant and just like change the trajectory of your life, kind of
Hmm.
thing. And the drill sergeant being like, they may say that they're being protective with contraception and everything, but like don't believe them. So like we already have an image in our minds of who she is, who she might be. So I think the rest of the film for her is about finding a way to sort of transcend that two-dimensional stereotype kind of thing and
Hmm.
present this woman who does have complexities in her own inner life and why she would even want to get together with this guy. And I do think, despite her limited screen time, that she does inject a lot of her own sort of Debra Winger isms into this in a way that this is going to sound strange, but she's like different from other girls. Kind of like I know that that's like a pejorative kind of thing that's said nowadays, but like she has a different kind of energy to her, you
She
know?
does. I feel like we always get really real Debra Winger on screen.
Yes,
She
exactly.
always feels like she's just putting herself in front of you. It's not like,
Right.
I don't know, you just can't tell that it's acting. I mean, it comes very naturally for her. And I do really appreciate that. I love that in terms of endearment, which I know you will talk about next time.
Oh, yeah.
Um, but it felt like this here too. And anytime she had some type of confrontational conversation with him, she was always saying, I mean, I've never posed as one of these women who are trying to trap you. I don't want to trap you. I want to be with you if you want to be with me. And
Yeah.
I think she handles a lot of their emotional breakdowns with a lot of maturity. And it all feels very, very grounded, as we kind of talked with Jessica Lange
Hmm.
and Frances. It feels very real. It's never too much drama being played up or it just being ridiculous. notions and behaviorisms. I always do appreciate that about her. And I'm sure, if young women watched this film in the 1980s, I'm sure that they probably could have related to her, because she seems like
Right.
a small town girl who is hoping for love and just kind of wants to explore the world, and he comes around and he is so charming. I mean, I can imagine all these women feeling very much like Debra Winger's character and
Right.
having the same thoughts and dreams as her. So maybe it's not very showcasey and splashy, but it is very real, and that can be appreciated.
Yeah. And she has a quick wit, I think, and she has like a playfulness in her eyes
Mhm.
when she's talking to him that I think makes it pretty easy for you to sort of fall in love with her or identify with her.
Mhm.
And they do end up kissing surprisingly fast, as far as these things go. But I think it's clear that they both have this sort of like a little bit of an inner depth beneath the surface that they seem to be. And they're like on a similar wavelength,
Mhm.
sense of humor wise. Like the bit about Moscow that they have in the beginning is cute.
Yes.
And
Yes.
just a sort of soft spoken quality, I think, that they
Mhm.
share.
Mhm.
And it's funny to read the reports that they couldn't stand each other when they were filming, because I do get that both of them have reputations for not always being the easiest to work with, but I do think their energies are kind of like similar in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah,
So that's what
definitely.
makes it a little bit like curious why they couldn't quite get along.
Mhm. I love her. I just love in general Deborah Winger's voice. It sounds very
Mm,
different compared to many other voices, and I love her laugh. She has like a very just a full blown laugh that anybody would be so happy to hear, and it kind of puts a smile on my face because it's not fake. It doesn't sound fake. It
right.
seems very genuine. So I like the genuine qualities that she brings to every role.
No, I agree. Yeah. And like the scene where he beats a guy up in the street and they're back in the motel room and he's kind of taking out his anger problems on her in a way, which causes her to be like, what the hell, man? Like, because of her like sultry voice and that sort of commanding quality she has.
Hmm.
It's like, listen, I'm not going to take any shit from you, which I think makes him feel more equally matched
Hmm.
than if this was just a type of thing where it's like this guy is taking up all the oxygen in the room and
Hmm.
what is she gonna do. So I think she gives it more of an intelligence maybe and a personality than the role is actually even written on the
Yeah.
page.
I will say, I saw who the officer was, but Richard Gere was no gentleman in this movie. He was constantly rude to everybody, uh,
Yeah.
rude to her, rude to her friend, who he dropped the C word on like no one's business. Um, his drill sergeant Foley, he is like constantly wanting to beat this man up, and literally they get into a fight. I'm like, Richard Gere, calm down. You are gonna get kicked out of this academy.
It's a lot to deal with. Not my favorite male lead by any
No,
means.
no.
Um, but you know what? I think their sex scene is pretty steamy.
Pretty
And
good.
again, there's a like a casual sort of a like a sensuality that really does sort of exude from them in a way that you can believe them as like falling deeper in love with each other.
Totally.
And I just think again, like they're sort of casually talking after they have sex is it feels very down to earth and realistic, and the dialogue feels more realistic in moments like that.
Mhm.
There's a moment where she says that she like entertained the idea of maybe joining up with the Marines and whatnot, or the Navy, and you know she didn't think it would be easy for her to join up as a woman,
Mhm.
and she sort of gets into her feelings of not wanting to be like her mother and like still working at the factory. And I think that's a solid opportunity for her to actually be a more fully fledged character. And she just has this very earthy presence, I think, where you could easily see this story from her perspective, even if the script is pretty vague and like sketching her as like a actual specific person.
Mhm.
So you can see her trying to inject some life into it.
Yeah. I did like the emotionally mature moments that they share between each other, and just kind of seeing her without him too in some of those scenes that we see in the factory, and just how drab of an environment it is for her and her friend, who are exciting and young and have so much life to live. They're kind of, you see the predicament of kind of being stuck in this small town and not really knowing where to go.
Right. And not wanting to repeat the past of
Yeah.
what her parents have been through and everything.
Yeah.
I think probably her best scene in the film is when she's opening up to him about her messy family history
Mhm.
and showing him the picture of her real father,
Mhm.
who turns out was a Navy officer himself,
Of
and
course.
how, like, she knows that he'll understand why there's something loaded in him also being a Navy officer, and how that might make them both sort of scared of history repeating, maybe in case she gets pregnant and then he leaves.
Mhm.
And it's like, again, the cycle continues. And I think all of that emotion, like the loaded quality of that conversation, is so well communicated in her face, and her like looking at him to see how he's going to react to that
Mhm.
sort of revelation. Yeah, again, she's doing a lot of heavy lifting here that there's not a lot that is given for this to be a showcase role, but I do think she takes it pretty well and
Mhm.
does better than other actresses would have
Mhm.
here. Obviously, like you said, that the ending where he literally sweeps her off her feet is a nice sort of iconic ending scene. Probably the only thing that people really remember from the film other than the song, Up Where We Belong. I will say the ending at times leaves a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, in terms of like, we've been through this whole like Sid and Lynette storyline, which
Oh
takes a
gosh,
very
yeah.
dark turn. And
Yes,
then
it
after that, it's sort of like, we're going to move on and here's a happy ending.
yeah, that I yeah, that was just, that blew my mind that they went in that direction, and everything
Yes.
that happened with that character, it was just like, once again, 0 to 100, and no point in between to like stop and think and process what's next for me. He just kind of was like, well, I quit the Navy. I got rejected with this proposal. My next step is the thing that he does in the movie. And yeah, it was a lot to take in, and it came out of left field for sure.
Right. So, not my favorite film of this group necessarily, but I do think it is a case where an actress is definitely bringing much more to the table than what is asked of her.
Mm.
So, good job, Debra Winger. Anything else before we get to our big winner?
No, good job, Debra Winger. Even though I was
Yes,
mean to her a little bit.
it's okay. She would be mean to you back, as
Oh
we know.
God, that's true. She would beat me up probably.
Maybe, maybe. Let's move on to our winner, the marvelous Meryl Streep in Sophie's Choice.
Ooh.
Yeah, this is one of those Titanic performances that people point to as like, what is great acting? It's this. And that's not me just like getting my own thoughts out of the way already. It's just like something that's been universally accepted, right?
I
Like
think this
Meryl
is,
Streep and Sophie's Choice, gold standard.
yeah, I think when it comes to those lists that rank Best Actress winners and all of
Right.
these, I think she is always in the top 5, top 10
Mm-hmm.
among 90 plus years of winners at this point.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, this role was highly sought out, as you can imagine, because of how much of a showcase it is. Goldie Hawn wanted to do it. Barbara Streisand wanted to do it. They thought about this other actress, Magda Vassilieva. They thought about Liv Ullmann, but then Meryl managed to get a pirated copy of the script and literally begged the director, Alan J. Pakula, to play this part, and she wound up getting the job. And she obviously really, really committed to learning the Polish accent, learning to speak Polish itself, learning German, and just like figuring her way through this very, very tricky part. So Sophie's Choice is about a Polish immigrant, Sophie Zawitowski, played by Meryl, who is living in Brooklyn in 1947 with her lover Nathan, who is dealing with a lot of psychological issues. And they meet their new neighbor Stingo, who is just arrived to write his novel. And Stingo takes an interest in Sophie and her story. So over time, she is revealing what happened in her past, including that the Nazis killed her father and her husband. And she went to Auschwitz in the concentration camps, and she was trying to locate her young son, plus the unspeakable choice that she was forced to make upon arriving. So, Emma, this is the big one. Tell me your thoughts on Meryl Streep, the enduring Meryl Streep, and her iconic performance here in Sophie's Choice.
I mean, I don't think it's controversial for me to say that Meryl Streep is one of the best actresses of our generation, and how lucky we are to have had 5 decades worth of work from her. And it seems like every time it's something brand new, it's something elevated, it's something that you can't even put into words to describe how you felt watching it. So this one, I've been meaning to watch Sophie's Choice for a long time. I'm sure you can understand that because of the subject and themes in this film, it's not something that you jump to watch necessarily.
And the runtime. Yeah.
The runtime as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think what was most interesting to me was the fact that this film focuses itself more so on Stingo and this writer character than I ever would have wanted. Sorry to Stingo, but I don't care about his story necessarily. I just want to hear all about Sophie and the life that she has lived, because she has lived a very, very dark and tough life. Same thing with Kevin Kline's character. I could kind of take him or leave him, more so leave him. But I do love Kevin Kline as an actor. Yeah, so it was first very strange to see the way that the story was written and structured, and the fact that the choice scene was like a minute and a half out of this entire film. Many things that surprised me. What did not surprise me was how great Meryl Streep is in this movie. I think at first you just kind of see her as maybe playing it safe a little bit in terms of the way that she acts with these men and is very playful. But as she starts revealing more and more about her life, you get such depth with her character, and she showcases not only a really great accent work that she does here, just these languages that she seems to have mastered perfectly, and really letting you go through this journey with her and feel everything that she is feeling. I just, out of all of the women that are nominated in 1982, I just felt like I felt her the most. She's so subtle in the way that she does that. It might just be the way that she softly speaks about something, or it could just be like a tear that comes down her cheek. It's perfect in every way, and I don't know how she does it. I mean, she's got 3 Oscars for a reason. She could have even more of them, considering like the 20 plus nominations that she has. But yeah, this one is just incredible. It's no wonder why people still talk about it to this day and consider it an amazing win. And that's what it is. It is a very, very amazing win.
Yeah, I mean, this is incredible work from Meryl, even with all the hype of this performance over the years.
Yeah.
I do think it still holds up remarkably well. I think every one of her talents, all of her tricks, I think are on full display here. Her mastery of accents, her ability to transform, her vulnerability and her sort of resilience, all her physical gestures. Like, it's such a technically accomplished performance that you immediately understand why, not only why she would win for it, but also why it still would be regarded in such a positive way 40 years later. The movie around her, as you alluded to, I do find interesting in parts, but also just like staggeringly dull in other
Yes.
parts.
In
Like,
the men in this film are just not interesting to me. Like
no, not at all.
Stingo, I could I see a world where Stingo just doesn't exist in this movie. Like he's just he just was entirely written out as the writer. Um,
Yeah,
I just do not find him charismatic whatsoever. Kevin
no,
Kline's character is just really hard to like, and
hard to
he's
take.
hard
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
just hard to take, exactly.
Hmm.
So yeah, the men are giving a little too much or not giving at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of the present day storyline is way too dragged out. And
Totally.
like also like having so many asides when I think like the real good stuff is just like in the past.
It takes like an hour and a half for her to tell you like how she met Kevin Kline's character and how she was entirely malnourished coming
Right.
out from the war. Like that comes so late into this movie.
Yeah. I think it's a film that is clearly based on a novel, derogatory. And I do think it flows much better probably in that format
Mhm.
where Stingo is like obviously the entry point into figuring out what Sophie's story is. Whereas this is just a lot of like meandering conversations in rooms and not a lot of like visual flair, not a
Mhm.
lot of, changing up visuals of anything. So it's again very monotonous at times. Yeah, the stuff with Kevin Kline I don't really care about. The stuff with Peter McNichol is whatever. He's such a cipher that he like barely even makes an impression for me. So I feel like she's not really helped very much by like the other elements of the film,
Yeah.
which to me is what makes it so amazing that she is still able to turn in this like, masterclass performance that is full of the kind of emotion and compassion that I feel is sometimes missing from the rest of the film,
And
you know?
there's so much repetition in the movie where the three
Yeah.
of them will have a good day and they'll be so elated and excited and love each other, and then something will happen with Kevin Kline's character, and it's like, all right, everybody's being dragged down. The Peter is trying to get Meryl Streep away from Kevin Kline, and it's like the cycle never ends. And yeah,
Yeah.
everything aside from what is happening in the past is just not even paying attention to it. Those scenes where when she reveals that she worked as like a as she was in the camps and she started working and translating and writing memos for one of the German officers because she has such a great grasp of the German language. That was really fascinating to me, and how
Yeah.
she was supposed to like take a radio and uh, give it to another prisoner or somebody who was in this home. All of that was just very unexpected in this movie. You never really knew exactly where it would lead to until she reveals the secret that she has told absolutely no one, which is a very heartbreaking scene. And I read that they only did that one time at her request. She
Mm.
said, I'm not doing this ever again. Like, that's your one take. And I wouldn't want to do it either. I mean, that's a heart wrenching scene. And I don't think anybody wants to hear children crying and screaming and her sobbing and these dogs barking. And it's so much. And it just weighs so heavy on you as an audience member, let alone participating in that scene too.
Yeah, very much so. I think so much of her flashback scenes is some of her best work that she's ever done. And also, just even in the way she tells her own story in the present, I think is so well done. The way, like, she in the beginning is sort of like casually tossing off the fact that her father died and that, like,
Yeah.
he was a civilized man and all that, because it's like it would hurt too much, I think, for her to really try to relive the truth of just how much it affected her.
Mhm.
I think, scenes like that are some of the more devastating scenes where it's like it's not actively trying to break your heart necessarily, but it is very revealing of who she is and where she is at this point in her life and her sort of laughing and her sort of good times vibe. that she has in the present is essentially to keep from crying.
Yeah.
Like she is presenting her as someone who has a very generous spirit with how much she kind of is committing to Stingo as a friend and everything, and wanting him to feel included, and like valuing him for his kindness that he shows to her. So it's like you can see the version of Sophie that she could have been if all these bad things hadn't happened to her, but also she is masking so much of what has happened to her.
Mhm.
So it's like she is sort of working on a few different layers.
And the way she very subtly showcases like a change in emotion where she might, sit down and
Right.
look fine, but then, you know, something will change. You can see in the facial expressions that this thought came to her mind. She's thinking about the past, and just the way she presents herself is totally different from how she was 2 seconds ago. And it's those changes that she does really, really well. And she's obviously mastered it in this film and just even continued to hone in on that part of her craft later on in her life. So, yeah, this is just a masterclass from her.
Truly, all of her long monologues that she has in the film, that's something that I feel like could get, again, dull or monotonous, and like is like all the monologues kind of feeling like they sound like each other, so it's like redundant almost. But I feel like she even manages to do different things with each of those
Mhm.
in a way to keep it engaging. Like the long one where she is talking about why her father died and her husband, and like how they were taken away by the Nazis, and how she like stole a ham or something and hid it under her dress,
Yeah.
but then they found it and she was sent to Auschwitz, and her family was taken away from her, and like her feeling like Christ had abandoned her, so she cut her wrists basically.
Hmm.
And it's like she's so open and exposed, and on top of everything still keeping up this like pitch perfect accent. And I feel like it's just a lot of trust that is given to her to pull this off and like tell this incredible life story of this woman without even, at least in certain scenes, without the benefit of visuals.
Hmm.
So it's just like her retelling everything, and I don't know, I just find it riveting in those small choices she makes, on top of the big ones,
Hmm.
that the way that she feels more and more comfortable in his presence, so she's continuing to open up further and further.
Hmm.
So,
This is Meryl
yeah.
Streep at Oscar nomination number 4 and Oscar win number 2 already.
Yes.
And she, if you didn't think that she was a talented actress at any point, you watch this film and you're like, ah, that's why. This is why we adore
Right.
this woman.
Exactly. Yeah, so then the other scene where she does finally open up about the full extent of the truth, and we get
Right.
the close up of her, I think that's really striking, of her kind of like in darkness, and she's looking directly at the camera
Mhm.
as if like we're Stingo, essentially, just like her telling us the story.
Yeah.
I think is one of the more enduring images that I remember. And it's this look of like guilt and also anxiety that like she doesn't know how he's going to react to this,
Mhm.
and also a bit of stress at the same time, like she has to really talk about all this in depth finally. Yeah, I just think like just the choice to have her look directly into the camera as if we are Stingo, I think is a smart choice in a film that doesn't always make the smartest of choices, to be quite honest. And then yeah, the extended flashback is incredible. Like watching it, I honestly like am sucked into the reality of what's going on,
Mhm.
in the sense that like I forget that this is Meryl Streep
Mhm.
speaking Polish for long, like paragraphs of dialogue,
Yeah.
and fully blending in with how any Polish person would speak, and still carrying the emotion of the scene on top of that,
Mhm.
like the urgency and like wanting to make sure her son is okay, and her being scared of being here in the first place, and then speaking German. Like speaking German with a Polish accent. It's just too much.
It
It's too
is.
much.
It is, but it's yeah, you don't fully appreciate all of that until you look back and think on it and
Right.
you're like, "Wait, no, it's first just being able to nail an accent is difficult. Having to nail it while speaking two languages that are not your native languages that you have very limited time to learn, like all of these, and then juggling the emotional weight of the past and her character. It's like juggling five different balls all at once and somehow
Yeah.
not crumbling. Not once does she give a weak performance here.
Right.
I just can't imagine, I just can't think of any instance where it was either lame or she didn't really like believe the way that I didn't believe the way that she said something. It just all felt so real. And I think in general with Meryl Streep, she just dives into a character and you forget that you're watching her. Like you believe that in that moment, that is actually who she is. And that's the kind of person that she is in real life. And then you are surprised the next time you see her in something different.
Yeah. She seems like someone who is always trying to challenge herself in that way. She
Hmm.
never wants to really like rest on her laurels. I know some people have said that some of her more modern work is a little not as strong, like Florence Foster Jenkins, that sort
Hmm.
of era.
Hmm.
August Osage County, people don't really love. But yeah, she always fully is committing. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is obviously that the sort of ending and the marriage proposal from Stingo, which is like, okay, buddy.
I know.
Um, like, and he's like wanting to provide a better life for her. And you could see just how bittersweet it is, like her face being like, this is a kid. Like, we're just at different places in our lives. And when he does end up showing her that, like, he will fully commit to her, that's when she reveals the secret. And then, yes, to talk about the scene itself, the most famous scene of the movie, when it is revealed that her choice was foisted upon her at Auschwitz to choose one of her children to save,
Hmm.
and one of them to basically be sent to death, is wrenching and probably the finest moment of her career. Just that, like, the gasping for air kind of grief that your body can barely even process what is happening to you.
Hmm.
It's astonishing work from her.
Yeah.
So,
Like I said, I was surprised to see how late in the game this scene comes and really how
mm-hmm.
quickly it goes through it. I mean,
Yeah,
you're just observing her and thinking that, all right, they're about to enter this camp and it is going to be uh, documented in similar ways that we have seen some other films that focus on the Holocaust and on concentration camps. And then it just goes for it with this officer just saying, all right, do you want your daughter or do you want your son to die? And which one are you fine living with? And it's,
mm,
she just keeps crying and saying, I can't choose. Why would you ever make me choose? And he said, all right, I'll kill both of them. And then she very quickly just says, take my daughter and leave the son,
yeah,
which yeah, that was, I don't know how somebody could live with themselves after doing that. Not saying that it's her fault. I mean, obviously she was given no choice. The movie is Sophie's choice. She just had to choose
right.
the most terrible thing that any parent would have to choose. And it is impossible to think that she would even have the courage or the strength to pretend to be happy and to want to deal with someone like Stingo or Kevin Kline's character after dealing with all of this stuff. And it leads to a very sad end for our girl
Mm,
later on in the film.
yeah,
But yeah, that just weighs so heavily on you, and certainly as an audience member too, to know that that's what everything was leading up to and how they
yeah.
handled it. It was difficult.
Very much so. But a very strong climax
Yes.
ultimately
Yes.
for her performance.
Hmm.
So, I think now it's time to get into the Oscar race of
Yes.
this year. So, for precursors, Meryl won pretty much everything that was out there, including the Golden Globe for drama, the New York Film Critics, Los Angeles Film Critics, National Society of Film Critics, Boston Film Critics, National Board of Review. She just dominated,
Hmm.
you know. But Julie Andrews won the Golden Globe for comedy musical,
Hmm.
which is a good win. Jessica Lange was a nominee at most Film Critics Awards and the Golden Globes. Sissy Spacek and Debra Winger were Golden Globe nominees, but weren't really much of factors ultimately.
Mhm.
So this was ultimately one of those years where there was no real race, really. Like, Meryl had it in the bag pretty much since Sophie's Choice opened, essentially.
Yeah.
And then all the precursor wins came in after that. They were quotes from even her fellow nominees where Sissy Spacek was like, I've never reacted to a performance as I did to hers in Sophie's Choice. It left me so overcome with emotion, I sobbed for a full 10 minutes.
Aww.
So, like, when even her competition is like,
Yep, take it.
I'm
It's
gonna
okay.
take the L on this one. Here, it's yours, Meryl.
Yes.
That should tell you something.
Yes.
But maybe this is a silly question. I don't know. But why do we think Meryl was our winner from this lineup?
Oh, they just saw it and they were like, "Oh, I guess that's a nice little performance that she gives." No,
They saw the movie.
they
Yeah.
saw the movie. Yes, they did see the movie, and they ignored all of the men involved in the movie and just focused on her because that's really the staying power of this film.
Right.
Would we ever think about Sophie's Choice if it wasn't for Meryl Streep's performance and all of her scenes? You certainly would not be thinking about it for Stingo. And I keep forgetting what Kevin Kline's character's name is. I just keep referring to
Nathan.
him. Nathan, there we
But
go. Certainly wouldn't really remember it for Nathan. So that's just the staying power of it and just how devastating those last few scenes are and the flashbacks are. Yeah, I think you watch this film and without even maybe even considering the other nominees, you were like, yep, this is why we give out Academy Awards. This is why this academy was invented to honor something as great as a performance as this is. So I just truly think that everything that we talked about in terms of the way that she performed all were huge factors, and people just were like, yep, she's it. She's our girl.
yeah. So this was not, in fact, a Sophie's Choice for the Academy,
No,
you could say.
they knew. but
Yeah, I
but
think.
but I do think the other winners, or excuse me, the other nominees gave a good fight too. I'm sure that there was quite a bit to consider with everybody else.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think ultimately she wins because of how unbelievably showy it is as a performance, and the transformation, the accent, the speaking in multiple different languages, the emotion, the sympathy you have for the character. It checks every single box that the Academy values in good acting. Plus, the benefit of her already being well liked and in the club, already a supporting actress winner,
Totally.
and now proving that she could fully lead movies. And like, we know that the Academy also loves investing in the future, that sort of thing. I think it just has everything, truly. It literally doesn't even matter what the other 4 nominees were giving.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like the more interesting question is like, what would have happened if Meryl wasn't there? And like, maybe that's what we'll talk about when we talk about who we think the runner-up was.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think, like, if anyone could have given her competition for the win, probably Jessica Lange or Julie Andrews would be my guess. All due respect to the other 2, but I just don't think there was quite enough there for either of them to have taken it. So
yes, I entirely agree with you on that.
yeah, so this was definitely one of those races where like there was no competition. That was like signed, seal, delivered, biggest lock of the night kind of thing that we would talk about nowadays. And I did watch the Oscar telecast itself earlier today, just because I always like to see the context of like what the vibe was. First of all, not a very engaging ceremony. I'm just gonna throw that out there. The hosts were a mess, a lot of clunky transitions, and like they awarded Gandhi 8 Oscars, and it's just like, okay.
Right,
It's
that's
just
right.
like a slog to the end.
Best picture, best actor, I'm sure best director, all the big ones.
Yeah, best original screenplay choices were made there. Yeah.
Who was the host of the Oscars that year?
Well, this was one where there were 4
Okay.
rotating hosts. So we had Liza Minnelli,
Oh.
we had Dudley Moore, Richard Pryor, and Walter Matthau.
Interesting group.
Name a more iconic foursome. I don't know.
Exactly. It reminds me of, what was it, like the 2021 or 22 Oscars when they had Amy
Right.
Schumer, Regina
Regina
Hall,
Hall
and
and Wanda Sykes.
Wanda Sykes. There we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, where it's just like, I don't know how you really came up with this combination, but
But
sure.
okay, I guess we'll just go for it.
Yeah. So anyway, I think it was a general sense, not only from Best Actress, but like for a lot of the categories, that was just like not a lot of surprises here,
Mhm.
just like going down the line of what the expected choices were. So that's what we ended up with,
I
unfortunately.
I haven't
Yep.
looked too much into Tootsie, and the Best Supporting Actress list, but what was Jessica Lange's? Was she winning pretty much all the precursors for Tootsie?
I don't think she was, but
Okay,
I haven't fully looked into that personally,
okay.
her own precursor run for that,
Because
but
I was also curious if people were like, well, I mean, she's definitely winning for Best Supporting Actress, as if they needed a reason not to give the Oscar to Meryl Streep, for
right.
example. But if they're like, well,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
she's winning Best Supporting, so she's got that in the bag. I was just curious about that.
It's sort of, honestly, it's actually sort of the other way around, where it's like Jessica Lange was never gonna beat
Gonna win
Meryl
it.
Streep.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so they felt like, oh, we can give her the award for supporting actress, even if that's an inferior performance. It's still like, you had a great year, Jessica. We got to give you something, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, I
Although that doesn't
was curious.
always help everyone,
Hmm.
like Scarlett Johansson, for example.
That's true. That's very true.
So,
That's our most recent double nominee.
yes. So, anyway, I think it's time to get to some Twitter questions. Bobby Doyle said, had Streep not leaned into the acclaimed accent work and sported her normal American accent, would she still have won the Oscar?
I think it would have been a really strange choice for her to never have that accent in general, coming as a woman who was
Polish
born
immigrant.
born and raised in Poland. Um,
Yeah.
Imagining her without the accent, first and foremost, that's a challenge in and of itself.
Yeah.
Um, I still think that there is plenty strength with or without the accent. Obviously, the accent and mastery of all of that is one of those great factors, but yeah, I think she still would have. I'm so
I think
perplexed
so.
as trying to imagine her speaking in her regular voice now.
Yeah, I think the accent was important to the character, so
Mhm.
like I can't really say that it would have even worked very well without that. And there's a lot of emotion behind the character and everything, but like that's a pretty key part of it. So,
Yeah, it does
yeah.
bother me when this was the main thing that kind of bothered me with Chernobyl. Great show.
Hmm.
Why is everybody like with an English accent? Or I think like maybe someone had an Irish accent at some point. I said, these are USSR residents. That's not happening.
It also always makes me laugh whenever Hollywood is like, "Oh, they're in France, so these people are just speaking English but
All
with a French
English.
accent."
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. That's always fun. Um Bruno said, would you consider Meryl's win an all time best or one of the all time wins in the category?
I would say she's definitely one of the all-time best in this category.
Yeah, she would make my top 10.
Hmm.
I don't know if I would say my all time best necessarily.
Hmm.
I think weirdly, it's like you kind of want to have the conversation of like best versus favorite in a way here.
Hmm.
Because like this performance is already so spoken for in a way by so many people that like, do I need to have her at the top of my ranking? I don't know that I do.
Hmm.
If that makes sense. Like, I just want to champion other performances, I guess,
My
for
top
my own
one
personal taste.
My top one, I think, will always be Natalie Portman. Oh, I should have mentioned her too. I should have mentioned her
Yeah.
in my beginning. The Olivia Colman one is the one that was the most fresh in my mind. However, Natalie Portman is
Right.
my all-time favorite Oscar
Yeah.
winner for
There you
Best
go.
Actress, because that's just a type of film that is so never awarded
Right.
at the
Right.
Academy level. So yeah, Sorry, Natalie, I didn't even mention you in the beginning. My gosh, my
Yeah.
brand is falling apart.
You did at least mention her as a heartbreaking loss for Jackie, at least.
There we
So,
go.
but anyway, Christoph said, "Why wasn't the passion for Meryl Streep's performance, which was clearly undeniable, not enough to carry the film to a Best Picture nomination?"
Probably because it focuses too much on the most lackluster male characters you could possibly have.
There you have it.
It's
Took
just
the words right
not
out of my mouth.
it's just not structured well enough. I wish they took more liberties with the way that the book most likely uh
Yeah.
paces things out. The pacing just doesn't turn out very well here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think even at the time there was a recognition that this is a great Meryl performance, but the movie around her is not quite up to her level.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is actually something that is very common with her nominations. Like, she weirdly doesn't have a lot of like Best Picture nominations to correlate with her nomination for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Fritz said, "Is Meryl really the gold standard in this category?" Kind of a similar thing. Not necessarily for me, but I wouldn't argue with anyone who said she was.
Mm-hmm.
Joey Gentili said, this is a loaded question. "Why do you feel that Meryl's win here is often considered the pinnacle of Best Actress when she's good, but like fourth at best in this lineup?"
Ooh, we got a controversial
Spicy.
statement here. Yes, very spicy. Why do I think she's the pinnacle? I think it just goes back to what we've already said and how I just feel the most from her performance, and I feel the devastation that she is going through, and I just feel like I'm really looking it through her eyes and not seeing her as Meryl Streep and seeing her as Sophie. So that's what I would say. But fourth best for him.
Yes, choices were made there. On top of what you said, I would say like the technical craft of it. I feel like it's very easy to point to it and say, look at everything she's doing, which is like even right on the surface. You don't have to even dig deep into it to be like incredible accent work and like the physicality and the everything. It's just like such Academy bait. There's just a very overt, impressive quality to it.
Yeah.
Existential Rock said, "Meryl in Sophie's Choice is considered by many to not only be Meryl's best work, but one of the best dramatic film roles ever, if not the best. In 2023, do you think it lives up to those expectations?" I think so. Are there any other roles that you think deserve those titles?
I do still think it does live up to a great showcase. I mean, as I said, Natalie Portman, I feel like she has given really great performances just constantly over the years. What I loved about Black Swan was also very similarly thinking that I was viewing this ballerina and seeing everything through her, feeling this tumultuous life that she is going through. You know, another person who I really love who won is Cher from Moonstruck. It's also like you just picture Cher as this larger than life person, and yet you look at her and you again are like, oh, this is a regular everyday woman who is, you know,
Right.
with Nick Cage he's trying to fall in love with her and all this stuff. I know those are maybe not as showy and not as deep and dark as this, but I feel like all three of them shared this. I don't know. It's just a very natural what they're able to bring to the screen, and
yeah,
you know, I love all of them for their own crafts and the ways that they got at that in their films.
Yeah, I think that's actually an interesting trio because I feel like they are all kind of transcending their own public image in a way and making you believe that they are those characters.
Yeah.
So I kind of understand what you're going for there. Yeah. Yeah, there's plenty more top tier, like, you know, Naomi Watts in Mulholland Drive is someone I always loved. This past year, we had both Cate Blanchett and Michelle Yeoh, who I think are both delivering some of their best work ever. Totally. So, yeah, there's plenty that we'll get to even on this show. So, Meryl is not just like the peak and now everything else is downhill. Let's just put it that way.
I agree.
Chels said, "We've hit the end for Julie Andrews. Rank her nominated performances, and are there any other performances that should have been nominated?" I would rank her nominated performances number 1, Sound of Music, number 2, Victor Victoria, and number 3, Mary Poppins, which I love all three. I do think Mary Poppins just doesn't give her quite as much to do as the other two, so that's why I have it slightly lower, but yeah.
I would have to
Great
agree.
three.
Yeah, I would actually have to agree exactly with your ranking just because
Hmm.
I just picture her in the mountains, the Swiss Alps running around. Like
Yeah,
that's when I
hard not
think of,
to.
yeah, that is what I will always first and foremost associate Julie Andrews with. But yeah, she gives a really great performance, plays off well with Christopher Plummer. And then Mary Poppins, I mean, it's cute. It's Mary Poppins. But yeah. And she definitely surprised me with Victor Victoria. So nice seeing
Hmm.
a very layered character from her.
Yeah. And what about other performances that maybe she should have been nominated for? I'm just
Hmm.
going to throw this out there. I would not have been opposed to a supporting nomination for The Princess
I was
Diaries.
just about to say, you're going for it,
There you
aren't
go.
you?
Yep, yep. Would have been fun.
Yes.
Would have been a fun comeback nom. Okay. David Pusak said, if you could give Julie Andrews one more Oscar nomination for one of her performances, which one would it be? We just said it.
We just said it. I'll
Yep.
give her, if they had a category for voice acting, I would give it for Shrek 2 and Shrek 3. She could get double noms since she plays the queen in
Yes.
those movies.
Good call. Doesn't she play like some kind of creature in Aquaman?
Oh
Is
yeah,
that true?
I think so. I actually haven't even seen those movies.
Yeah.
But yes, I do see Cara Thien is who she plays in that.
I'll take your word for it.
Oh yeah, actually she's really focused on doing voice work lately. Despicable Me series. She's Queen, she does the voiceover, and she's Lady Whistledown in the Bridgerton
Bridgerton.
places
Yeah, yeah.
things shows. There
Yeah.
we go.
Yes.
Couldn't remember what that
um
was.
Geo said, this is a wild question, so
Ooh,
strap in.
all right.
Why stop the gender bending at Victor Victoria? Recast these 5 nominees in the roles of this year's Best Actor nominees, and vice versa. I'm not going to do vice versa. So basically, we're going to cast these women in the roles that are nominated this same year in Best Actor. So if you want to pull up the nominee list for Best Actor this year,
Wow.
I came up with a combination here since I saw this question ahead of time, and I was like, this is very difficult.
Yeah, I'm gonna be blank. It's all on you for this one.
Okay, well, how about you just tell me what you think of these? um, I don't think anyone here should play Gandhi.
No,
Just gonna throw that out there.
I think that's a good
Um,
start.
yeah, but you know what? If anyone can transform, it's Meryl. Right?
Love it.
Not saying she should, but like, if these are my choices, there we are. Debra Winger, I think, would make for a pretty spunky presence in like Tootsie.
Okay.
I think she would have fun with that. She has like like that husky voice that she could play with a little. I think like an older Sissy Spacek in Missing.
Mm-hmm. That could work.
Interesting reversal, like as like
Definitely.
a conservative mother who's looking for her son, right? Something like that. Like an older Jessica Lange in The Verdict. She would play a lawyer in another nominated role this decade in Music Box, so that feels like a good fit. And then Julie Andrews in the sort of faded star Peter O'Toole role in My Favorite Year. I don't know. That's
Not
the best I
bad.
got.
I'm surprised that you didn't automatically put Julie Andrews in for Tootsie, since that also kind of has
That's fair. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense actually.
interesting.
So,
That my brain like melted a little bit trying to figure
yeah,
out
that's
this
fair.
question, but I like your lineup. I
Okay.
could get it.
Thank you. Again, nobody here should play Gandhi. Just reiterating. Zoe G said, which 1982 gender bending movie is better, Victor Victoria or Tootsie?
I have to admit, I actually did not get a chance to watch Tootsie, so I don't think I should be answering this question.
That's okay. Well, you should watch it. I do recommend it.
Okay.
But I think in terms of like the gender bending element of it, that Victor Victoria is a far better portrayal of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I do personally prefer Tootsie as a film overall, despite its kind of iffier elements. So
Interesting.
yes. Patrick Ross said, which of these roles could you see Frances Farmer in, other than Frances?
I could kind of see her taking on missing. There's like a dynamic with a parent, maybe not your own
Mm-hmm.
parent, but butting
Mm-hmm.
heads with that person, and then just trying to figure out this very tumultuous world that you are currently inhabiting. I feel like she could bring that.
Yes, that was exactly my answer. I think she would bring that like rebellious spirit to it really
Totally.
well. We got a lot of questions about like Jessica Lange and like whether she would have won in another year without Meryl, starting with Fritz. Fritz said, is Jessica the ultimate case of in any other year she would have won? Possibly.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
think so.
sometimes people just get unlucky. Sort of like, and I know that I've talked about this past year a lot on this show, but for me, it's kind of like a shame that Cate Blanchett in Tar didn't come out in like the year that Jessica Chastain won, because
Mm.
I think maybe like Kate would have won in that kind of a lineup. It's like one of those things where the competition sometimes you have like two all-timer performances in one category and then only one can win.
Hmm.
So
It would have been cool if we got a tie. If we had another tie for the best actress
that
race.
would have been amazing. Yes. Jeffrey Kerr said, if Frances wasn't released this year, would Jessica Lange have instead been nominated as a lead actress for Tootsie, or would she still have contended in supporting? I think it's possible that she would have been, because the whole thing with her being supporting for Tootsie is that the New York Film Critics, who, from my understanding, felt bad about not giving her Best Actress for Frances and figured that they could sort of justify her being in supporting for Tootsie, even though it's like very much a borderline kind of a performance between lead and supporting. So, yeah, I don't think she would have been in supporting if Frances hadn't come out and sort of gotten the acclaim that it did. I think her getting in the lead for Tootsie would have been a lot tougher, though. But
Mm,
I don't know, maybe she would have replaced a similar love interest role in Debra Winger, that sort of thing.
that's true.
Yeah, that's what I would say. But who knows? Glenda Miss Jackson, if you nasty, said, say Sophie's Choice comes out a different year. Does Jessica win 2 Oscars this year? Or does she just take it for Tootsie?
I kind of could see it happening. I could
Yeah.
see her winning for Frances. I don't know then if that would translate into maybe Kim Stanley winning
Hmm.
supporting for Frances. Maybe she doesn't have
Interesting.
Tootsie in the bag for that part. I don't know, but I do think that Frances was very,
Hmm.
very strong to have won.
Yeah. I do think she probably takes this, but I do think also a big reason she actually won for Tootsie is that, like, we're going to celebrate your great year and them feeling like she should have gotten something.
Hmm.
So I feel like they probably would have gone in a different direction in supporting, would be my guess.
Hmm.
I don't know where that would have landed. Maybe it lands on Glenn Close and the entire history of the Oscars is changed forever.
There you
Who knows?
go.
And I have less stress in my
I
life.
was about to say you don't have a villain origin story.
Right. And now we have flying cars and everything's solved. Yes.
Society of Glenn Close won her first Oscar.
Exactly. Um, Amar said, if Frances was released in 1984, do you think she could easily have won and prevented Sally Field's underwhelming performance winning in that extremely weak ass field? Yes, I do. um,
I'm pulling up the list actually to see who all was nominated for that year.
yeah, it's a year where a lot of great actresses in the mix, but not a lot of well remembered films or performances.
Yeah, I can't say that I remember any of these. And funny enough, you also have Jessica Lange and Sissy Spacek in the lineup that year.
Right. for Country and the River.
Couldn't tell you what that is.
We'll see on this very show in a few weeks
Yes.
what those movies are.
You will learn.
All right. So Amar also said, if Lange and Streep somehow tied, do you think this would have gone down as the greatest tie in Oscar history?
It pretty much well could. I don't know. I just always remember Barbara Streisand saying, "Hello, gorgeous." And so,
Yeah, her and Katharine Hepburn, I think, still takes the cake.
especially because those are opposite end performances to get a little bit of
Yeah.
love from them. These are very much similar in terms of like dark themes and very dramatic filled roles.
Right. Good point. Ben Miller has an interesting thought. He said, I am alone in my Jessica Lange is fifth beliefs, aren't I?
Yes.
So I'm not sure if this means Jessica Lange is fifth in terms of like quality for Ben or like fifth in the vote totals of what actually happened. But I can't say I've seen that take very often. I really don't think she was fifth. So
I don't either. You did share with me that thing that said like why Meryl couldn't win, why Jessica couldn't win. And I guess it was
Yes.
like, this is just too much going on in this film, and we just that can't let her win ever.
Right. So I don't know. Who's to say?
As if
I don't
that's
think she was fifth.
no.
Super fun question here from Dustin Van. Of course, we all know Jessica Lange had a massive career resurgence in part because of her 4 seasons on American Horror Story. Cast Lange's fellow nominees here in the 4 roles she played on American Horror Story.
Ooh.
So that's Constance from the first season, Sister Jude from Asylum, Fiona Good from Coven, and Elsa Mars from Freak Show. I assume you've watched
I have.
those 4?
I have
Yeah,
watched
okay.
those far. I'm trying to think who would be. I would say, oh God, I can't even think of this now. This is blowing my mind.
I went with Sissy Spacek as Constance, the first one,
Okay.
because I feel like she could do like the Southern Belle kind of bitchiness pretty well, would be my guess. She could do that. I kind of want to like look at this and be like, Meryl could do all of them, but like I know that's not the
she
question.
very well could. I think Meryl could do Sister Jude very well because it's kind of like this descent into madness, and I think Meryl can show a very good range. I was actually thinking maybe Sissy Spacek for Coven as kind of the more. It's a much more breezy season, you know. It's not as
that's a good point.
Not as harsh as some of the other ones are, and I feel like Sissy could bring that carefree attitude into Fiona. I think her name is. While still being bitchy.
Right. I went with Julie Andrews for Elsa because there was that like singing component to that character.
That's a good one.
And also I feel like you could see her being like that protective of her troop kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well,
I would agree with that.
I don't know where Debra Winger fit into any of this. I forgot about Debra.
I'll put Debra as Constance because
right.
She's a bad neighbor, and we've heard some bad things about Debra, so maybe she could play that up.
Poor Debra.
I know. Yeah. I do like you, Debra. Unfortunately, your reputation precedes you a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I forgot that you had already mentioned Meryl for Asylum.
Yes.
I think that's kind of similar to like what she did in like Doubt. Like that would be a similar kind of character for her.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could see that. Either way, that would have been a fun combination if that had actually happened. But
I like this question.
Happy for Jessica Lange that she got so many great showcases on that show.
Yeah.
All right. Christoph said, Streep, Spacek, and Lange have a combined 13 lead nominations in the 80s, and at least one of them will pop up every year. So is this the definitive 80s lineup? Sort of, in the sense that it's all 3 of them facing off with each other here. I don't know if I would rank it like best of the 80s necessarily, but...
Or maybe even like people you absolutely associate with the 80s. Like when you said like we have Richard Gere, so we know we're in the 1980s. Like I feel more so of like people that you would see in those movies. Like I think a few years later is when Top Gun came out, and so people were like, "Oh, Tom Cruise, the '80s movie star." I think maybe those would be the ones, and definitely are the ones in terms of Academy recognition and who the Academy loved. But the general public, I think they were into their hunky Navy boys and John Hughes movie stars and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
that's true. Jamie said Sissy's nomination, a classic Halo nomination, or deserving nomination overshadowed by iconic competition. I think it's a little bit of an afterglow Halo for me.
Yeah, as we kind
I
of
think,
said,
yeah.
she's not given much here.
Let's do a few more miscellaneous questions. Okay, Rob Montoya said, fast forward to 2023. If all of these films were remade today, who would you cast in each of these roles? I spent a lot of time trying to cast this, so I'm not going to put you too much on the spot of like coming up with 5 inspired choices right off the bat here. I went with, speaking of Princess Diaries, I went with Anne Hathaway in Victor Victoria.
Ooh, that's nice. She does have the singing element. Ariana DeBose too. I feel like she could kind of
That is an excellent choice.
she did that kind of in Schmigadoon this season. It was set in like the grimy Chicago period, so that kind of reminds me of the Victor Victoria era as well.
I like that a lot, actually. So for Frances, I really struggled with this one, but I ultimately landed on Florence Pugh, who I think could provide that kind of like temperamental, maybe kind of nature to Frances Farmer.
I think someone who I think is kind of spunky is Kristen Stewart. So I could kind of see her doing it too. I know I'm just randomly pulling out these people, but I see her like in her rebel era. I could get behind her doing that.
That would be fun. I think you would need more of like an up and comer for an officer and a gentleman, because like that's not a super strong part.
Yeah.
Maybe like, I don't know, she's been around for a little bit, but like Dominique Fishback, like that kind of a performer at that stage in her career, I think could maybe inject a little bit of life into a smaller role like she did in Judas and the Black Messiah.
Maybe even Rachel Zegler too. She always kind of like adds a bit of a bump to her
that would be
roles.
good too. Yeah. And then for Sophie's choice, tough. I decided to not do like American actress doing this, so I went with Joanna Kulig from Cold War.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Who is a Polish actress herself. I don't know if she's like a little bit too old for that now, but like I said, she's Polish. She has a very striking presence. I think she could bring a lot of life to it.
My favorite, among my many beloved actresses, Cate Blanchett. I think she is someone who is just brings such a devastating quality to the screen. I could see her pulling it off.
Yeah, she spoke German in Tar.
There we go. She's got one of them down.
Yeah, so maybe a slightly younger Cate Blanchett. I don't know how old Sophie is supposed to be, so like
I'm not sure
I
either.
might be pulling that out of my ass that she's supposed to be young, but I don't know. I don't know if any of these movies should be remade, but like maybe a Victor Victoria I think would be interesting in 2023. So Jamie said, it was once rumored that nominees here, Meryl Streep and Sissy Spacek, would star in a remake of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. If you had to cast the remake from these 5 ladies, which 2 would you choose? Or would you still choose Streep and Spacek, and who would play which sister?
I'm definitely picking Debra Winger for one of them.
Oh, that would be, certainly the squabbling part of that would work. I was going to say Jessica Lange and Meryl Streep, because like it's like 2 titans going up against each other.
Actually, I would agree with you on that one. I was just poking fun at Winger for misconduct.
Poor Debra catching strays.
She's just constantly getting my things. But I would love to see a Streep and Lange team up. That would be iconic.
I mean, we kind of already got that a little bit with like Jessica Lange and Feud, Betty and Joan. So like it's already there.
Totally.
But just like a straight adaptation, I think would be fun to see them play off each other. So And maybe Lange in the Betty Davis role, who gets to
Mm.
be more over the top and like
Mm-hmm.
jealous of her sister. In this case, Meryl Streep. I don't know. I could see it working out. Okay, so let's get to, I think, a few snub questions. Andrew Carden said, would Diane Keaton have made the cut if not for Shoot the Moon's insane January 1982 release date? Possibly. I still haven't seen Shoot the Moon, but a lot of people do regard that as a great performance from her. She was nominated for Reds the previous year. She's a previous winner for Annie Hall. I think if she replaces anyone, it's probably Debra Winger. But yeah, releasing a movie in January is always going to be tough for a Oscar campaign.
Mm-hmm. I do believe I saw her name. I think she might have been nominated at the Golden Globes
Yeah.
for that. So
Mm-hmm.
I know that she was floating around in that time, but I also have not seen that film, but could have
Yeah.
happened.
Joey Gentili said, recast these 80s Oscar talents and Karen Black in the roles above. Sally Kirkland, Joan Cusack, Diana Scarwid, Whoopi Goldberg. Okay, so I'm gonna go with Whoopi Goldberg. Would be very fun in Victor Victoria.
Mm.
I think she would have a lot of fun with that.
Mm-hmm.
Karen Black, I think absolutely in Frances. She has a lot of that stormy quality that could work perfectly for that. Diana Scarwid, I have to be honest, I don't really like as an actress, so I don't know if I would like to see her in any of these roles. Like, if you've seen her in Mommy Dearest, not great, Bob. But so I guess missing because it seems like the least challenging for her. Sorry. I know that's really mean, but like that's where we're at. Joan Cusack I think would be really fun in like An Officer and a Gentleman.
Mm.
You know, the rom-com kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Although it's not really com, more just
Rom.
drum. Um, and then Sally Kirkland and Sophie's Choice. Why not? That's what I would go with.
I like that list.
Okay, two more from Jeremy Kaplan, who said, do you think all the Golden Globes buzz around Pia Zadora's Best New Star win for Butterfly got her close to an Oscar nomination? And more importantly, wouldn't it have been super fun to see her nominated in the same category as Meryl Streep and Sophie's Choice? Do you know the story of Pia Zadora?
I do not, unfortunately.
Okay, well, this is a fascinating one in the history of the Golden Globes. It was considered a joke at that time, even, and especially looking back on Golden Globes history. So she got very bad reviews for her performance in this film Butterfly, but she still won the Golden Globe for New Star of the Year, which was apparently just bought for her, essentially, by her husband, who like wined and dined the Golden Globes voters and did the whole schmoozing thing that we've always accused the Golden Globes of having trouble with. And yeah, that's one of the more famous, like, you know, corrupt Golden Globes stories.
This is Emily in Paris, but way back when.
Yes, very, very much so. Yeah. So I guess the answer to that is like, no, I don't think she got anywhere close to a nomination. I haven't seen Butterfly. I haven't been advised not to, so there you go. And last one from Jeremy Kaplan. 1982 was the year when Cagney and Lacey premiered on television. Which two of these nominated actresses would you most like to have seen as cop partners in their own TV show? So what's the buddy cop combination we've got from these five?
Right. Do we want like good cop, bad cop? Do we want maybe Jessica Lange as bad cop and Julie Andrews as good cop? I could see those two dichotomies.
That would be wild. I can't really see Julie Andrews as a cop.
That too.
But like, I would like to see it if she could try. I don't know. Like Sissy Spacek and Debra Winger, I think would have an interesting chemistry. Maybe again, like Debra Winger, bad cop, perhaps. Sissy Spacek seems like the classic good girl kind of like.
Totally. And I feel like they would. I picture both of them sitting in the cop car eating donuts. Like I can just picture the girls having a fun time in the car.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. That should have happened. Anyway, let's get to our final segment where we will discuss who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. So, Emma, who do you think it was?
I personally think that it was Jessica Lange who was the runner-up. We have talked extensively about it, but just to reiterate, I think it's a really great performance from her. It shows the range that she can bring to a role such as this, and I think she has brought it since then. Yeah, it's a showcase for her, and I'm glad that she was nominated for this role and kind of put her even more into stardom post King Kong, and even though she was panned for
Right.
that and all. So I think that people did really appreciate the work that she was giving here. We did have the argument of, is it too anti-Hollywood and too anti-entertainment industry? Possibly that could have definitely rubbed off on people. I still think that it's the second best among this lineup. I was also thinking a little bit for Julie Andrews too, just because she
Mm-hmm.
brings for something fresh and lighter here. So I was trying to decide which one it could have been, but ultimately I think the more dramatic weight of Jessica Lange's performance kind of outweighs it a bit for me.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I do think Jessica Lange was the runner-up here. I think Julie Andrews probably is a strong third,
Mm-hmm.
and I do think she is very much like that apple in a barrel of oranges, kind of like, look at all the weighty stuff that everyone else is doing here. At least she's giving something fun and like also doing something different that we haven't seen from Julie Andrews before. I think that would have been like, yeah, why not throw a vote to old Julie? But ultimately, I think Jessica Lange was one of the hot actresses of the entire year. And I do think, like, ultimately, like, most of the votes went to Meryl. So I don't think it was particularly close. And Jessica's nomination for Tootsie gave them an out to just, like, give that the vote to her there. But I do think the incredible amount of range that she displays in Frances could not be denied. And just like, I can't really see any of the other three overtaking that. And it is like a most improved kind of thing, like you said, from King Kong. Like, look
Mm-hmm.
at you. You're an actual like actress and you could carry this very dramatic film
Yeah.
like the best of them.
I really wish that they would release the numbers for how many people voted for who. I'm sure
You and me both.
that would make your job very easy in
I
that
know.
sense. But it would
Mm-hmm.
just be really interesting to see a year such as this where the vote distribution lies and like how
Right.
much of, if anybody voted for, certain people in the category versus other
Right.
people. That would be really interesting to see.
Sure would. Yep. If I was the Academy president, that would be one of my first tenets.
Hashtag release the vote count.
Yes, thank you. And final question for you: who would get your vote from this lineup?
I think it still goes to Meryl Streep for myself. Just one of the all-timer performances and one of our most beloved actresses who was doing the damn thing from the beginning.
Yeah, I will say that this is a razor thin margin for me
Mhm.
between Meryl Streep and Jessica Lange,
Okay.
because I think both are turning in phenomenal, some of the best of all time kind of performances. Meryl does edge out Jessica for me just slightly,
Mhm.
but again, like, this is not like a blowout type of thing for Meryl Streep for me. I really do commend people go check out Frances if they haven't already.
Definitely.
But Sophie's Choice is just like a gift for any actress, and she managed to elevate that gift even further beyond what it could have been. So I would very much be joining the Meryl bandwagon and be fine with her being the best actress of the year. So, thank you so much again, Emma, for doing this. This was a blast. This flew right by.
It really did. I am so
Hmm.
happy that I got to do this, and thank you so very much for asking me to come on. This was super exciting, and hopefully our paths get to cross again in some other Oscar race down the line.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, tell people where they can find more of you on the internet.
You can find me rambling on Twitter, or X, I suppose, formerly known as Twitter, uh, at Ema_Sasic. I'm on Instagram at Ema Sasic, and then Letterboxd at Ema Sasic. And then you can check out my reviews at Next Best Picture. If you want to read some stories that I'm working on in the Palm Springs area, I'm on the Desert Sun's website. And then I host Weekly Pop, the weekly entertainment podcast, which is available on Spotify and any and all other platforms.
Very good. Okay. And thank you all so much for listening. You could find me at Kevin_Jacobson on most platforms, and the show's at Oscar Runner Up on Twitter, Instagram at And the Runner Up Is. Rate, review, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you liked what you heard, go to patreon.com/andtherunnerup_is, where you can hear a whole bunch of bonus episodes. And next week, we'll be discussing the Best Actress lineup of 1983, where the nominees were Jane Alexander in Testament, Shirley MacLaine in Terms of Endearment, Meryl Streep in Silkwood, Julie Walters in Educating Rita, and Debra Winger in Terms of Endearment, with the winner being Shirley MacLaine. So with that, thanks again, Emma.
Thank you.
And I will bid you all adieu.